Chapter 218. Come, let's eat first. I have something to tell you after we're done eating. Jianghai was a little surprised to see Aphrodite sitting in front of him. Jianghai really didn't know that Aphrodite was actually so pretty. He thought back to the first time he saw Aphrodite. At that time, she was in the police station. Her skinny body was wrapped in a large piece of clothing. Her messy blonde hair was scattered behind her head, her empty eyes, and her head was like a skeleton. It was really hard to associate her with beauty. Later, she came out, washed up, and Jianghai even bought her new clothes. However, she was like a skeleton wearing clothes. It was hard for people to feel that she was beautiful. Later on, although Jianghai saw her many times, she was basically wearing very dirty clothes and working in the soil. Either she had just finished work or she was on her way to work. Jianghai wasn't a pig, and he didn't like every woman he saw. In fact, he was often distracted when he walked, so he didn't pay close attention. Tonight, he saw that, after a few months of cultivation, she really was quite pretty. Her soft blonde hair had been specially permed by her today. Her hair was curled into two curls that draped over her shoulders and hung on both sides. She was wearing a little black dress that he bought back then. But how much did she weigh back then, and how much did she weigh now? Although she definitely couldn't be considered fat now, not even slightly. At most, she had returned from being a skeleton to the level of those women who like to look pretty. A height of more than 170 meters and a weight of more than 90 kilograms. If this was considered fat, then no one else could. Aphrodite didn't wear any jewelry today, and the V-shaped neckline on the little dress was a little too big. Not only did it reveal her slender neck and beautiful bones, but also that pair of not-so-small cough, coupled with her thin waist, long legs, and tender white skin. It really made Jianghai have a whole new level of respect for her. Especially that pair of big, watery blue eyes, which made people want to dive into them with one look. Of course, Jianghai didn't feel that way, but he had to admit that she was very pretty now. After hearing Jianghai's words, Aphrodite also nodded lightly. She picked up the knife and fork in front of her and started cutting the steak that Jianghai had just cooked. Jianghai's steak was indeed not very good. It was the best steak, but the heat was a little too high. Some parts of the steak were even burnt. But Aphrodite didn't care. She continued to happily cut the steak into small pieces and put them into her mouth. The two ate very calmly and didn't talk much. The truth was that it was indeed inconvenient to talk now. Jianghai could say whatever he wanted, but every time Aphrodite wanted to say something, she had to put down the utensils in her hands before she could do so. This was very troublesome. Although Jianghai wasn't a gentleman, he wouldn't disturb others when they were eating. At the very least, he hated it when people disturbed him when he was eating. Dinner was quickly finished. After Jianghai and Aphrodite cooperated to tidy up the things, Aphrodite sat on the sofa like an ostrich. In her mind, she was already thinking about what Jianghai would do in a while. Would he come up and kiss her directly, and then do it on the sofa? Or would he waste time and take her to the room, and then, or in the kitchen, or in the bathroom? It didn't matter to her. As long as Jianghai liked it, she could do anything. Phew, I'm done tidying up. Just as Aphrodite's imagination was running wild, Jianghai also finished tidying up and walked to the sofa. When she heard Jianghai's words, Aphrodite's face turned even redder, but she still looked at Jianghai from the corner of her eyes. It's like this. Let me tell you why I asked you to come here. Jianghai sat on the sofa beside Aphrodite. The distance between the two wasn't too far, but it wasn't too close either. At this time, he also looked at Aphrodite and said, "Here it comes." When she heard Jianghai's words, Aphrodite tried hard to adjust her breathing, closed her eyes, and prepared to accept any request from Jianghai. Anything would be fine. Even if he called the other 7 girls over, she wouldn't mind. I may have a way to cure your throat and let you speak, but I haven't tried it before, so I want to ask if you want to be my #1 patient. However, the crazy Jianghai that she imagined didn't appear. Instead, a gentle voice came to her ears. Hearing Jianghai's words, Aphrodite couldn't help but be stunned. Then she raised her head and looked at Jianghai with a surprised face. Although there was no action as expected, but Jianghai's words had a greater impact on her. "Can speak. Looking at Aphrodite's somewhat panicked gestures, Jiang also nodded affirmatively. But because I haven't done the same experiment before, I'm not sure if it will succeed. Although it was fine not to say it, but Jiang still felt that it was better to make it clear. It was better to be safe than sorry. If something went wrong, then it would be troublesome. So Jiang hesitated for a moment and explained the situation clearly. Hearing Jiang words, Aphrodite didn't have any dissatisfaction, but her eyes were full of tears, but she didn't let these tears fall. Instead, she nodded vigorously. No matter what the conditions were, she was willing to try and agree. If I cure you, I need you to sign a confidentiality agreement. This matter can't be told to others. If you agree, then we'll start the treatment tomorrow. Seeing that Aphrodite agreed, Jiang also said to her seriously. For such an agreement, Aphrodite didn't hesitate at all and immediately nodded in agreement. After that, she forgot how she got home. She only knew that when she reacted, she was already sitting on the sofa in the small house. How is it? Did your dream come true tonight? Is the boss strong in that aspect? How long? How strong is it? Just as she was sitting on the sofa in a daze, Dana, who had just come out of the shower and lived in the same villa as her, couldn't help but happily gesture. Aphrodite had always been interested in Jiang. This was no secret among the 8 girls. And these 8 girls were also willing to offer themselves to Jiang or something. Of course, they couldn't really fall in love with Jiang. The feelings of repaying a debt of gratitude were much stronger than the feelings of love, and only Aphrodite could feel it very clearly. When they heard that Aphrodite was going to Jiang place for dinner today, they all felt that something must have happened, but they didn't expect her to come back so early. Since she was back, then Dana had to ask clearly. Don't talk nonsense. I only went for a meal. All right, I might not be going to the vegetable garden tomorrow, tell Aunt Philip. Seeing Dana's gesture, Aphrodite's little face couldn't help but redden, then quickly ran back to the room. Something's wrong. Dana couldn't help but think oddly when she saw Aphrodite's actions. This woman was too obvious. In the blink of an eye, the sun had risen the next day. Jiang slept well that night, but when he opened the door in the morning, he found Aphrodite already sitting in front of his villa. The pair of dark circles under her eyes meant that the girl didn't have a good night last night. You're so early, hee. All right, since you're here, come in. Let's have breakfast first, then we'll work. Seeing Aphrodite's appearance, Jiang couldn't help but smile speechlessly, but didn't say much and only let her in. Jiang made mixed grain pancakes for breakfast today. It wasn't difficult to make, and a few sets were finished in a few minutes. Jiang ate 3 sets. Aphrodite ate 1 set, and the remaining 2 sets were left for Daliana and Marion. Since you're here, then I won't go for a run. How about this? Let's find an empty room and then start the treatment. Seeing that Aphrodite had also finished eating, Jiang led her into a guest room. Because I'm not sure what will happen in a while, it's best to put you in a temporary unconscious state and tie your hands and feet. Is there a problem? After entering the room, Jiang said apologetically to Aphrodite. Aphrodite naturally didn't mind. She was already very happy to give birth to a monkey for Jiang in the first place. Not to mention being tied up, she wouldn't care even if there were a whip and candles on the side. Therefore, she obediently nodded at Jiang and signed the agreement. After she was ready, Jiang knocked her out with a karate chop. It wasn't that Jiang didn't want to use medicine, but he didn't. And in order to not leak it out, he could only do this. Then he tied Aphrodite to the bed, and then Jiang right hand pressed on Aphrodite's head. Let's test the effect of a neck scale first. Muttering softly, Jiang also mobilized the aura in his body that had increased to one of the 480,000 scales. As his right hand surged out and poured it into Aphrodite's body gradually changed as well. The originally white and tender skin began to turn red like a cooked shrimp, and then large drops of sweat with dirt flowed out of her pores, instantly dirtying Jiang bed sheet. Jiang knew that this was cleaning the dirt in her body, but the specific effect would have to wait until she woke up. Unknowingly, more than 3 hours had passed. During this time, Delina and Marion had also woken up. They came to take a look and then went down to eat. After eating, they also came up to take a look. After all, this matter was also related to them. From around 7 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the dirt and sweat in Aphrodite's body had been expelled. Because she had suffered too much in the past, the hidden injuries in her body couldn't be cured in just a few months. The biggest effect of this aura was to restore people's health. So if you wanted to modify it, the effect was still unclear. Until 12 o'clock, Jianghai was a little impatient. When he was about to go downstairs to prepare lunch, Aphrodite's face instantly paled. The red light on her body contracted at this time and gathered at her throat. Then, Aphrodite suddenly woke up from her sleep. Her head tilted, and she coughed out a mouthful of black phlegm with traces of blood from her throat. Cough, 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 ah, ah. When the bloody phlegm fell to the ground, a few slightly hoarse syllables came out from Aphrodite's throat that was originally unable to make any sound. Hearing these words, Jianghai couldn't help but grin, while Delina and Marion had already jumped up in shock. This meant that there was finally hope for their throats. Chapter 219. You're back so early, how was it? You stayed at the boss place for the whole day. I'm sure you've already won over the young little boss. If you really did, remember to let me know so that I can have a taste of the little boss's strong body. When Dinah Taylor returned to the villa, she found Aphrodite, who had changed into a new set of clothes, sitting stiffly on the sofa in the villa. She didn't mind at that moment and used her dusty body to gently lean over, gesturing with a smile on her face. Dana, do you want to talk? But when Aphrodite saw what Dana was gesturing this time, she didn't shy away with a red face. Instead, she turned her head and looked at Dana with a serious expression, gesturing back at her. Who doesn't want to? Dana looked as if she'd been struck by lightning when she saw Aphrodite's gestures. She sat there blankly for a few seconds before smiling helplessly and throwing herself onto the sofa. I could think of a way to make you talk. Seeing her best friend's dejected look, Aphrodite seemed to have made up her mind about something as she looked at her with a serious expression. Seeing Aphrodite's sign language, Dana also looked at her, her eyes full of confusion. I can make you talk, but I want you to swear that you'll never betray our boss in the future. Never, never, not even think about it. The boss's words are our everything, and his will is our will. We have to move forward with the boss's interests in mind, including our bodies. Whether the boss needs it or not, we have to offer our bodies of our own accord. Seeing Dana's puzzled look, Aphrodite began to make gestures. If Jianghai were to see her gestures, he would probably be confused. Could it be that this fellow had joined some sort of marketing organization before? Are you sick? Dana was a bit puzzled when she saw Aphrodite's seemingly brainwashed expression. Promise me. Aphrodite didn't mind Dana's hesitation as she said resolutely. All right, I promise. As long as I can talk, I don't mind being raised as a beautiful woman, much less just a slave. Is that all right? Dana said with a smile when she saw Aphrodite's serious expression. I am Aphrodite. No matter what Dinah was thinking, at least she had agreed. So Aphrodite breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at her seriously, and then from her mouth came the scale she had practiced all afternoon. When Dana heard Aphrodite's words, she was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? When Jianghai opened the door the next morning, he found that there were two people sitting on the stairs in front of his house. Looking at the two eager, smiling faces, Jianghai was also happy. Why are you sitting there? Don't you know how to knock on the door and come in? Come on in. Let's have breakfast first, then we'll talk. Jianghai said to the two people in front of him. Then he stepped aside and allowed the two girls to enter his mansion, while Jianghai was treating Dana at a cocktail party in the capital. Chili was sitting in front of the bar with a glass of Long Island iced tea in her hand. A straw kept stirring in the glass, whether it was the rich people in China or abroad. In fact, 90% of the rich people liked cocktail parties very much. For some young people, this kind of cocktail party was the best place to pretend to be rich. It was also the best place to show off their status in front of their female friends. At the same time, it was also an opportunity for some playboys to make friends with the socialites who also came with impure intentions. Next were the rich people who weren't very frivolous. The main reason they came to this kind of cocktail party was because they wanted to make friends with each other. They felt that they could talk about some decent business here. That was their goal. Even if they didn't have any business to talk about, it was also a good thing to get to know people here or make friends with other people. Speaking of which, Chile had stayed abroad for many years, so she was very fond of lying on her stomach and whatnot. Although she didn't participate in some messy partying, she was still very interested in attending such cocktail parties after returning to China. But unknowingly, this little beauty had grown up. After going through a huge change, Chile came here more to socialize. Of course, there was another purpose because she didn't know where to go at night. It was too cold and boring to go home. Her personality didn't allow her to go to the bar and get drunk. So, other than working overtime at the company or coming to the cocktail party to pass the time, this became the only thing she could do. Logically speaking, if a beautiful woman sat at the bar like this, there would be a lot of men coming over to seduce her. Unfortunately, at this time, there were many people looking at Chi Li from afar, but there were no people coming over at all, because Chi Li's face clearly said, "Get lost." If it were some other woman, those guys who thought about their lower bodies would probably try. But in front of Chi Li, haha, was this a joke? At least in their circle, there wasn't anyone who dared to provoke her. There used to be people who didn't believe in heresy, but now they were no longer in this circle. So, looking at Chi Li from afar, these people couldn't do anything other than whisper. But today, there were people who didn't believe in heresy. "Miss, may I sit here?" As a gentle voice sounded, Chi Li raised her head and looked at the person sitting on the chair beside her. When she saw this person, Chi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness, because the person in front of her was none other than her biggest enemy, Wu. "Uncle Duh, the security here is getting worse and worse. Even dogs are allowed in. Forget it. I'm not in the mood to stay here. Let's go home." After muttering to herself, Chi Li took her handbag and stood up. However, her muttering made Wu's face turn a bit ugly. This woman really didn't give him any face. If it wasn't because he loved her, if it wasn't because his family still needed her, he would have, "Miss Chi, maybe you don't want to see me, but I have something that you might want to know." Looking at Chi Li's back, and Wu said loudly, "Unless in group goes bankrupt." However, Chi Li didn't even want to look at this guy. She really didn't want to look at this guy anymore. Seeing that Chi Li really ignored him, and Wu once again suppressed his anger and said loudly, "It's about your husband, Jiang Hai." With his roar, the originally noisy venue instantly quieted down, and Chi Li's originally firm steps couldn't help but stagnate and stop in place. Seeing Chi Li stop, and Wu couldn't help but cut her off, but the anger in his heart burned again. Because Chi Li has already used her actions to show that Jiang Hai's position in her heart is very important. You may not know yet. Your husband, Jiang Hai, bought a manor in the suburbs of Boston in the United States with unknown money. In the manor, it could be said that he hides mistresses in a golden house. He not only hired 8 women who used to be in the flesh business to entertain him in the manor, but also adopted 2 14-year-old girls in your name. Looking at Chi Li in front of him, and Wu said slowly, looking at his appearance, it was as if he had already taken control of Chi Li. In his imagination, Chi Li was most likely to be furious after hearing this news. Yes, furious. A long time ago, and Wu was very clear about Chi Li's family situation. After all, the two were about to get married. Chi Li has 2 sisters in total, and the second sister is an illegitimate child. After Chi Li learned about this, she directly fell out with her father. When Chi Li and Wu were together, the sentence she said the most was, "If you dare to find a woman behind my back, I will castrate you." In the end, Wu didn't find a woman behind her back because he really loved her, but this love caused her family to be ruined. Therefore, no one knows better than Wu how much Chi Li hates a person who is unfaithful to love. Now, Jiang Hai not only took her money, no one knows where Jiang Hai's money came from, so they can only guess that it was Chi Li's money, but also found a bunch of girlfriends. Chi Li is destined to not be able to swallow this. Is there such a good thing? Hearing what Wu said, many people present had such a thought in their minds. Although they would say that Jiang Hai is a scumbag and too shameless, who doesn't want to live such a life. But now, their fantasies have to be put aside for the time being because they still want to see Qi Li go berserk. Oh, that's it. I already know about it. But unfortunately, they're destined to be disappointed today. After hearing in Zhongwu's words, Qi Li still didn't turn around, but just said a sentence lazily. You don't believe me? I have photos. Hearing Qi Li's casual words, and Zhongwu's heart thumped. I believe you. I've known about this for a long time. Not only does he have a lot of girlfriends overseas, but he also has a few in China. I've seen him rolling in bed with some internet celebrities at home many times. This is nothing. With a shrug, Qi Li's voice did reveal a kind of indifference. This tone is like saying that Jiang Hai has more express deliveries than cheating. Hearing Qi Li's words, the people in the audience were a little dumbfounded. Men have needs. I'm not by Jiang Hai's side, so naturally, I have to arrange some women for him. If he needs them at any time, he can solve it at any time. Also, you will get tired of having one. There is nothing wrong with preparing more. After gently stroking her hair, Qi Li turned around and looked at Zhongwu with a playful smile. Chapter 220. You've changed. You're not you anymore. Are you crazy? And Zhongwu couldn't help but take a step back subconsciously when he saw that his former favorite had changed beyond recognition. He didn't dare to face Qi Li anymore. I've changed? Yes, I've changed. After I saw through your true colors. Hearing in Zhongwu's words, Qi Li turned her head again. She didn't care about the current situation at all and continued. Jiang Hai is my husband. He has replaced all the memories of you and me. I'm willing to do anything for him. We used to watch movies, go to the park, go shopping. Jiang Hai and I have been together. He was my first kiss. He was also my wedding night. My heart is all tied to him. As long as he's happy, I'm willing to do anything. But this is between us. What can you do? If you have time, go investigate him. You'd better think about how to raise and group shares. After Qi Li finished speaking, she left the venue directly without looking back. When she left the door, there was a roar behind her, followed by the sound of something breaking. Hearing this sound, Qi Li thought she would be very happy. But she suddenly found that making her enemy flustered and exasperated did not make her very happy, because she seemed to really not care about Zhongwu's existence at all. Now, her heart was thinking about what Zhongwu had just said Jiang Hai. Qi Li walked out of the villa quickly. At this time, outside the door, Qi Li's driver and assistant had already received the news. When Qi Li came out, her car was already parked in front of the villa. Qi Li opened the door and sat gently in the back seat. The atmosphere in the car was a little awkward, because the people outside already knew that Qi Li was inside. After all, these people outside were either the driver or the bodyguards. If anything happened to their boss inside, they would be the first to arrive. Although they didn't hear Qi Li's declaration with their own ears, they did hear a few words from her. President Qi, there's something I don't know if I should say. Since you and Jiang Hai are like this now, the chances of you being together in the future may be very low. If you say that just now, it may have the opposite effect on your future relationship. After a while, Qi Li felt the car constantly speeding on the road. After a long time, she said to her carefully, when did I say I was going to have a new relationship? Jiang Hai and I are husband and wife. I can say whatever I want. Forget it. It's useless to lose my temper with you. By the way, when do we have time recently? I want to take a vacation. When the assistant with glasses said the first sentence, Qi Li directly rebutted back. However, after saying half of the sentence, she also understood that the assistant beside her was not her enemy. She was also doing it for her own good, so her original words softened a little. We'll have time in May. After the 3-day holiday, the acquisition of the West 4th Loop should be completed. At that time, we will have about half a month to do nothing. Hearing Qi Li's words, although the assistant was a little worried about her, she immediately checked the schedule on the iPad next to her. Half a month. Then we could go find a place to play and relax. Hearing the assistant's words, Qi Li whispered, go play? Okay. But I just bought a house this year. I don't have much money. Chile was still very good to the people around her, especially this assistant with glasses. Not only would she bring her along when discussing business, but she would also bring her along when going out to play. Food, accommodation, and plane tickets were all covered. However, as a girl, there were still many other expenses in addition to food, accommodation, and plane tickets. A trip abroad, even if she didn't spend anything, would cost tens of thousands of yuan. This was not too much for a girl's salary. After all, she could earn at least 100,000 yuan a month. However, the bad thing was that she had just bought a big house of 320 square meters in the East Third Loop. Including the renovation, she spent nearly 20 million yuan, of which 12 million yuan was from the loan. Of course, Chile also helped. Now, after paying off the mortgage every month, she really didn't have the money to go out to play. Hearing the assistant's words, Chile looked at the night outside as if she had made up her mind. She said solemnly, "Then let's go to a place where we don't need to spend money. Let's go to Boston." Achoo! At this time, Jiang Hai, who was in his house in Boston, couldn't help but rub his nose hard. "Did you catch a cold?" Seeing Jiang Hai suddenly sneeze, Aphrodite, who was standing beside Jiang Hai, asked nervously. It was obvious that she had now tied all of her body and mind to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's words were her imperial edict. Jiang Hai's consciousness was the direction she was moving in, and Jiang Hai's life was her everything. No, maybe it's because I smelled something that was a bit irritating and I'm allergic. Seeing Aphrodite's overly concerned look, Jiang Hai immediately waved his hand. His current physical fitness was twice that of a human's. It would be strange if he was sick with this kind of physical fitness. He guessed that he might be a little allergic to something, which was why he sneezed. "You must be careful," Aphrodite said seriously when she heard Jiang Hai's words. "Cough, I know. It'll take at least some time for Dana to wake up. How about this? I'll teach you how to speak first." Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little awkward in the face of Aphrodite's fiery gaze and could only change the topic. When Dana and Jiang Hai entered the room this morning, Jiang Hai first knocked Dana out like how he had dealt with Aphrodite yesterday. However, he didn't tie her hands and feet, but directly poured spirit chi into her. This scene couldn't be seen by others, and he only let everyone in after the spirit chi took effect. At first, Aphrodite was scared out of her wits when she saw the red light on Dana's body, the sweat, and the black stuff being expelled from her body. However, after learning that she had been like this yesterday, she felt much more at ease and stayed here to wait for Dana to wake up. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, these girls wouldn't be able to wake up without at least 3 hours. In that case, it wouldn't be good to stay here and be bored. So Jiang Hai decided to teach Aphrodite how to speak. Okay, Aphrodite wanted to hear Jiang Hai say that since there was still some time before Dana woke up, they should go to the room next door to do what they liked, or even just do it here. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't say that. "Come, repeat after me. I am AI. You are he. She is a woman, and she is an animal." Since he said he was going to teach, Jiang Hai began to teach. He slowly guided Aphrodite to say the simplest words, and Aphrodite learned very seriously. As long as she was alone with Jiang Hai, it would be best to do that kind of thing. If not, it didn't matter what they did. As long as she could stay with Jiang Hai, everything would be worth it. This was a man who had given her a new life. Before she knew it, Jiang Hai had already taught Aphrodite for more than 3 hours. Aphrodite was an adult, and she had no problem writing English. She had learned it in the orphanage before, and now she just needed to learn how to speak. It wasn't too difficult to speak since it wasn't a blank piece of paper. For example, many university students in the country studied mute English. They could understand what was written on paper, but they couldn't open their mouths when they wanted to speak. However, such students might not be able to do it when they first arrived abroad, but they only needed to stay there for a few months. The pronunciation they had learned and the words they knew would be of the greatest use. Generally speaking, normal communication without slang wouldn't be a big problem. However, if they had to learn a new language, it wouldn't be settled in a few months. Aphrodite was very willing to learn, and she really wasn't stupid. Therefore, after 3 hours of one teaching and one learning, She had already grasped the pronunciation of over 100 words. Her voice was also a bit clearer than yesterday, but it was still a bit hoarse. This needed to be slowly adjusted. Just as Jianghai and Aphrodite were having fun, one teaching and one learning, Aphrodite suddenly lay on the bed. Dinah, who was lying on the bed, suddenly tilted over and coughed out a mouthful of black sputum mixed with blood onto the ground. Jianghai had studied it before. This should be the necrotic part of her throat, which was the problem of her natural pathological changes. When spirit qi transformed her throat into a normal human throat, it would forcefully shave off these necrotic parts, thus forming this mouthful of black phlegm. After coughing out the black phlegm, Aphrodite gradually woke up, but she was still a bit confused. It was obvious that Aphrodite was much more prepared than Aphrodite yesterday. At least, the first thing she said after waking up was a word. Although it was only a single letter, Aphrodite still knelt there and cried bitterly when she heard her own voice. How many years had it been? When she had long given up hope, Jianghai had once again given her hope. This kind of feeling was truly too shocking. She had never thought that she would have a day like this. Aphrodite also walked over to her good friend's side and held her head, slowly comforting her. It was only after a few minutes that Aphrodite finally noticed the things that had come out of her body under Aphrodite's gestures. She glanced a bit bashfully at Jianghai and quickly darted into the bathroom. Although Aphrodite had already told her last night that after Jianghai cured her, not only would her throat heal, but she would also return to her youthful state, she was still so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. This Jianghai was truly too mysterious and too amazing. Chapter 221. In the next few days, Jianghai's villa was very busy. He could add 12 more scales every day, so it didn't matter if he used one. The effect of this scale was extraordinarily good. After curing Dana and Aphrodite became close to them that night. Hilda Leonard and Peggy Hall, who lived with them, were 20 years old and 19 years old respectively. When they heard the two girls declare that they had joined some kind of cult, they didn't believe it at all. Their first thought was that they didn't believe it. However, when they really heard what they said, they were shocked. As long as they could speak, not to mention the fact that they were originally grateful to Jianghai and had a good impression of him. Even if they really joined the cult, they wouldn't want to. So on the third day, the two of them became the ones who could speak. After discovering Jianghai's magic, the two girls officially joined the party. That night, Jianghai used 2 more scales to fix Dana's and Marian's throats. The two girls' dependence on Jianghai increased even more. That night, the two girls almost went to Jianghai's room to sleep. Of course, they weren't prepared to exchange their body for the right to live here like the other two girls did. This time, they were serious. Of course, Jianghai also seriously threw them back to their room. Although Jianghai was now single, he still needed little left and right in the middle of the night, and then he would change the phone to a certain pay channel. However, it didn't mean that he could act like a beast and lay his hands on 2 underage girls. After the addition of the 6 girls, Jianghai had more and more patience for Jianghai to operate on. Originally, there were a total of 8 girls who joined Jianghai's manor as workers. Now, 4 of them had returned to being ordinary people. Of course, they were still learning to speak, and at the same time, they couldn't speak to outsiders. Only Jianghai explained that he was using Chinese medicine to treat them. As for when they would be cured, that would be another story. The remaining 4 girls who couldn't speak, Sheila Romani, Ohilia Cliff, Bridget Nelson, and Janice Joy, also completed their treatment in the next 2 days. When they found that not only could they speak, but their original internal injuries had also disappeared. Their bodies also recovered and even returned to their original state. It was like a computer system that felt a virus and directly reformatted itself. They were really surprised and grateful to Jianghai. Under Aphrodite's brainwashing mode, they were really grateful to Jianghai and liked Jianghai very much. Jianghai had become a god in their hearts. After all, this was something that humans couldn't do, and their goal was to give up everything for Jianghai. Of course, everything they had now was given to them by Jianghai. Other than working seriously, The only thing they could do was to give themselves to Jiang Hai. After treating all of them, Jiang Hai would stay in his villa every night and teach these girls to speak. It would take about an hour or so. There was no other way. The only person who could teach them here was himself. If others knew that these girls could speak in just a few days, wouldn't that be terrible? However, when Jiang Hai taught them to speak, these girls' mentality of repaying became more and more serious. These girls were different from Delina and Marion. Although they had experienced bad things in the past, they had also matured a lot. They also had a better understanding of men and women. At least, they knew very well what a man of Jiang Hai's age, especially a very straight man, liked the most. During the day, they worked in the fields and dealt with the soil. Although the vegetable field in Jiang Hai's manor wasn't very big, it had all the automatic farming machines. Usually, they didn't need to use their hands to wave hoes, shovels, and the like. They only needed to use their hands to move the machines inside. The only thing they needed to use their hands for was to tie up some vegetable seedlings to let them grow healthily. However, when they went to Jiang Hai's place for classes in the evening, they wore less and less clothes. Although it was cold outside, Jiang Hai's room was very warm. Therefore, these girls were still normal at the beginning. Later on, they changed from sweaters to woolen clothes, then to sweaters. Finally, they wore a very thick down jacket outside and a thin shirt inside. Some of them were lace, some were loose, but none of them were not empty. Under the lamplight, Jiang Hai could actually see everything. However, these girls didn't mind Jiang Hai looking at them. Sometimes, in order to cooperate with him, they would deliberately pull down their collars or come close to him and touch him with their bodies. This made Jiang Hai very passive. Jiang Hai was also a normal man. It was not good for him to be like this all the time. However, nobody could teach them except for him. Of course, sometimes this kind of feeling was pretty good as well. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Hai had cured these girls for more than 10 days. It was already the middle of March. March was the season of spring. Even if it was the coldest night in Jiang Hai's manor, the temperature had already reached above 0 degrees. During the day, the highest temperature had even reached about 10 degrees. Everywhere was the season of spring and flowers blooming. A few days ago, Iron Bull came again. This time, he brought the fish seedlings that Jiang Hai bought last winter because he bought them very early. In addition, Jiang Hai was a big customer, so he specially helped Jiang Hai to raise them for a while. Now, after the fish seedlings entered the water, their survival rate would greatly increase. However, even if there was no commission, Jiang Hai didn't care because he had a way to make these fish better. These days, he would put some effort into the sea every day. Last year, he used his blood to change the attributes of this grassland. At that time, he almost died of exhaustion. Now, the effect of his blood on this grassland was still very effective. As the snow melted, other places were green and yellow. Jiang Hai's grassland was already green. Luo Binsi and the others didn't need to specifically choose a place to graze the cows. They just needed to let the cows keep moving. In the sea, Jiang Hai also let Big Fool take him and use spiritual energy to improve a lot of aquatic plants. Of course, the most important thing was the corals. Corals are also living creatures. When Jiang Hai injected the spiritual energy in the scale into a coral, it may not feel anything at first, but the next day, it will grow bigger. Moreover, this kind of posture is still growing. Originally, Jiang Hai's coral reef was not small. Under the nourishment of his scale, it now seems to have the intention of expanding. As for the aquatic plants in the fish farming area, they were like the original ranch, absorbing Jiang Hai's spiritual energy and growing happily. These aquatic plants also attracted a large number of aquatic animals. The first batch of octopus and cuttlefish were growing better and better at this time. In Jiang Hai's view, they could be used as bait. Before these fish went into the water, Jiang Hai injected the spiritual energy of a scale into each fish cage. This piece of spiritual energy was absorbed by tens of thousands of fish seedlings. It seemed insignificant, but it could let these fish seedlings grow in the largest form and in the best condition. Jiang Hai already had some small expectations at this time. You said that the cattle he raised were already so invincible. If the fish he raised were better than the cattle, then how much money would he have by then? Thinking about it, he was still a little excited. Because he was not short of money for the time being, Jiang Hai lived such a comfortable life again until yesterday. Yesterday, his smashed F-650 was sent back because someone maliciously attacked it, and it was fully insured at the time. Therefore, the insurance company still sent back the full amount of money Jiang Hai spent to repair the car, which meant that Jiang Hai did not spend money to repair the car. Looking at the car in front of him, Jiang Hai remembered that he seemed to have made up his mind to buy a car before Fu Yuan left. In the end, he did not buy a car until now. Now that the car was back, he was ready to buy a car while he was at it. After resting at home for a night, Jiang Hai woke up early the next day. After running and eating breakfast, he was ready to leave. Just as he was driving to Winthrop, Shinny Clive called him. "Hello, where are you? How was the incident at your manor?" "I haven't seen Delina and Marion for many days." Listening to Shinny Clive's voice, Jiang Hai chuckled. "It should be fine." The police didn't give a clear explanation, but the number of police patrols here has increased a lot. I don't know if those people have the guts to trouble me. How about this? I'm going to Winthrop today. If you miss Delina and Marion, come back with me. Jiang Hai never knew what was going on between Shinny Clive and them. Jiang Hai's sixth sense told him that this woman was someone he could befriend and even marry. However, perhaps because he was tricked by Chili once, Jiang Hai could not make up his mind to do anything. Fortunately, it seemed that Shinny Clive was not ready. The two confronted each other like this, which was actually quite fun. "You're coming to Winthrop? What are you doing here?" After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shinny Clive, who was already sitting in the car and was about to drive to Jiang Hai's place, stopped his hand that was about to start the car engine. He asked with some surprise, "A few days ago, I went into the mountains with a group of people. That person told me that you have to have a car to do anything in the United States. So today's weather is good, so I'm going to buy a few cars." Looking at the bright sun outside, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Buy a car? Okay, I'm at home. Pick me up when you come over." Chapter 222. "Hey, sister, why did you come down again? Aren't you going to brother-in-law's place?" Looking at SH-20, Clive, who came out of the garage again, Karma Cliff, who just walked out of the door with the trash, couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Where did brother-in-law come from? Really, we're just friends." Hearing Karma's words, SH-20 Clive's face couldn't help but blush, then looked at her sister with contempt and said, Okay, friend, but aren't you going to your friend's house? Why did you come out again? Not going? Have you found your conscience and decided to go shopping with your cute sister?" Looking at SH-20 Clive in front of her, Karma Cliff couldn't help but chuckle, then said to him with a smile. Hearing her words, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but curl her lips. "It's not what you think. Jiang Hai just drove over. He was going to buy a car, so I went with him." Hearing her sister's words, SH-20 Clive said a little unnaturally, "Oh, there is such a thing. Then can I go with you if we're just friends?" Seeing SH-20 Clive's slightly embarrassed look, Karma Cliff also threw away the trash, leaned over, and raised her eyebrows. "This you ask him?" Hearing her sister's words, SH-20 Clive really didn't know how to answer. Although she didn't like to let her sister become the third wheel between her and Jiang Hai, she really couldn't say this. Beep beep. At this time, Jiang Hai's F-650 also appeared in front of the sisters. Seeing Jiang Hai's car, the two people here had different expressions on their faces. SH-20 Clive was a little panicked, while Karma Cliff was a little excited. Obviously, she was ready to go out with Jiang Hai. The upbringing of the Clive family was very strict. Of course, their father was not a very strict person. Their mother was. Shite Clive's father was a French chef, which had been introduced before. As for her mother, to be exact, she was her stepmother. Before she became a full-time housewife, she was a teacher. Ever since she married her father, she had become a full-time mother. In the past, she had also taught high school. It was precisely because of this mother's influence that Shinny Clive became a teacher in the town's elementary school. Karma Cliff was now in high school. Although she was about to graduate, as long as she lived at home, it was inevitable that she would be controlled by her parents. Their mother, who had been a teacher in high school, knew very well how crazy the boys and girls who were about to graduate were. Because it was close to graduation, the children would do all kinds of things, play all kinds of things that they didn't dare to think about or do in the past. According to the statistics of the show, among the girls in the American Empire, the probability of having their first time was highest during this period. Because many of the elementary and middle schools in the United States were connected, divided into elementary and middle schools. They didn't have a so-called promotion relationship, but the elementary school was divided into grades 1 to 6, and the middle school was divided into grades 6 to 12. There was no clear division of middle school and high school. After graduating from elementary school, there were naturally people who knew about this, but not too many. When they graduated from middle school, it was naturally the time to have fun. Many girls tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time during this period, and at the same time, some went astray, such as inhaling things that they shouldn't have. Carmacliff's mother used to teach in middle school, so she was very clear about what high school students would do. 2 years before Carmacliff, she was basically controlled. Of course, she had resisted before, but the result was not very good. Her mother was really very inflexible. Even when she wanted to come into contact with society and work, her father used his connections to put her into the Ocean Temple. Every day, she entertained some old men who she had to call uncle, so she really didn't have much chance to go astray. Just like now, since it was a rest day, she had nowhere else to go other than to stay at home. Even if she wanted to go shopping, she had to go with her sister, which really made her a little speechless. Now that she finally had a chance to go out and play, how could Carmacliff let it go? As soon as she saw Jiang Hai's car drive over, she ran over immediately and said to Jiang Hai, who was sitting in the driver's seat, "Hey, brother-in-law, are you here to take my sister to your house? Then can I go with you?" Sis, brother-in-law." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was shocked. He did have some feelings for Shite Clive, but it didn't seem to be to this extent. Don't listen to her nonsense. Today is Saturday, and she wants me to go shopping with her. I don't want to go, so she wants to go to your manor to play. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed and a little happy, Shite Clive's face suddenly blushed. She immediately took 2 steps forward, walked to Jiang Hai's side, and said to him, "Cough, come to play, it doesn't matter, then let's go together." Hearing these 2 people's words, Jiang Hai smiled. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Carmacliff couldn't help but shout, "Brother-in-law, wait for me." Then she hurriedly ran into the villa to change clothes. As for Shite Clive, she looked at Jiang Hai speechlessly. This guy is too gullible, but it seems that Jiang Hai doesn't dislike the word brother-in-law. Now that she's about to graduate, she has nothing to do at home. She won't disturb you, right? Seeing his sister rush into the house, Shite Clive sat in the front passenger seat with Jiang Hai's help. "It's okay, you still don't know me. I don't have much to do in the manor. The main thing is to let Luo Binsi take care of the grazing, and the fish farm is to be handed over to AI Dawa. I'm more of a hands-off manager. I'll be happier if you go." Hearing Shite Clive's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He didn't mind people going to his place to play. That's good. Seeing that Jiang Hai loved his sister so much, Shite Clive's heart was also happy. Generally speaking, it was quite troublesome for a girl to go out. It took a lot of time to change clothes and put on makeup. But Carmacliff may not have paid much attention to these before, plus she hasn't changed her winter clothes yet. Plus, she is 18 years old, which is the time when her skin is the best, so she doesn't care much about makeup. After waiting for about 10 minutes, she jumped out and ran out. She didn't wait for Jiang Hai to open the door and rush to the back row. "Brother-in-law, where are we going? Aren't we going to your manor?" After she sat down and fastened her seatbelt, Jiang Hai also turned the steering wheel and drove in the other direction. But as soon as the car engine started, Carmacliff, sitting in the back, couldn't help but ask, "Let's buy a car first." Hearing Karma's words, Jiang Hai also responded with a smile. "Buy a car? What kind of car do you want to buy?" Hearing Jiang Hai say that he wants to buy a car, Carmacliff was obviously very curious. "I want to buy a lot of cars. After all, there are only 3 pickup trucks in my manor. It's good to drive them out on normal days, but there are some formal occasions this car is not very good to drive. For example, when I have to pick up some more particular guests, these cars are a bit troublesome. After all, my manor is going to sell things in the future. If those customers need us to pick them up, we can't drive this car. Looking at Karma Cliff behind him in the rearview mirror, Jiang Hai also explained patiently. Oh, that's right, by the way, brother-in-law. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff also nodded in agreement. Then she remembered something. She leaned on Jiang Hai's main driver's seat again and asked excitedly. But this time, before she finished asking, she was interrupted by her sister. Okay, don't call him that. It's not like you don't know his name. We haven't, so just call him by his name. Although Jiang Hai and SH-20 Clive do have some small things between them, they haven't made it clear to this extent. Well, Jiang, what car are you going to buy? I know a friend who works in our car shop here. Maybe he can give you a discount. Looking at her sister, who seemed to be really angry, Karma Cliff wisely changed the way she addressed her. Oh, that's great. The car I want to buy is not cheap. Hearing Karma Cliff's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. As soon as she heard that the car Jiang Hai wanted to buy was not cheap, Karma Cliff immediately sent a text message to her friend. About a few minutes later, she lay down on the seat again and said to Jiang Hai, "Everything is done." Looking at Karma Cliff's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. This little girl is really funny. Although Jiang Hai is not as rich as when he first came, generally speaking, he still has the money to buy a car. But since Karma is willing to help, he is also willing to accept. Although he is not short of money, it is naturally better if he can get a discount. Even if he can't get a discount, it is also very suitable to give Jiang Hai a better car. Seeing that Jiang Hai and her sister get along well, SH-20 Clive is also very happy. Although Jiang Hai and her had never made it clear, if things continued to develop like they were now, the two of them might have a chance. If she really and Jiang Hai at that time. Thinking of this, SH-20 Clive's face became even redder. She quietly raised her head and glanced at Jiang Hai, who was driving, and she felt her heart beating faster in her chest. While the three people in the car had their own thoughts, Jiang Hai's car also drove to Winthrop, the largest car shop. Chapter 223. Hey, Karma, over here. When Jiang Hai's car stopped in the parking lot, and the three of them got out of the car, they saw a white guy waving in the distance. Seeing the waving man, Karma, who came down from the back seat, also waved her hand. Hey, Louis, Jiang, my friend is over there. Let's go. After calling the boy over there, Karma couldn't help but say something to Jiang Hai and SH-20 Clive, and then the three of them walked to the car shop in the distance. Why did you come so late? Come in. When the three of them walked in, the white guy couldn't help but smile and greeted them. This young man named Louis seems to be about the same age as Karma. He should also be a high school student. Karma also said that this is her classmate, and it seems that he should be going to college this year. This young man is a purebred white man, with short blonde hair and white skin. He doesn't look short, about 1.8 meters, and he is also a little handsome. Now he is wearing the employee's uniform of this car shop. Although it's just a uniform suit and tie, it makes him look like a little adult. If there is no accident, he should be interested in Karma Cliff, but obviously, Karma doesn't have a good idea about him. When he took the initiative to take Karma's hand, Karma took a step back and flashed to Jiang Hai's side, which made him a little embarrassed. But after all, the boys in the United States are much more mature than the boys in China. Obviously, this is not the first time such a thing has happened. So he just smiled and looked at Jiang Hai and SH-20 Clive. When he saw Jiang Hai, he didn't say anything. But when he saw SH-20 Clive, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, and then he nodded gently. This is a greeting. This way of greeting is very normal in the United States. Karma, what is your relationship with this kid? Why does he want to hold your hand? As the young man led the three of them inside, SH-20 Clive pulled his sister over and whispered to her. It doesn't matter. He's the captain of our school's baseball team. Usually, he seems to be interested in me, but I can guarantee that I have no interest in him. We're just classmates. Hearing her sister's question, Karma Cliff didn't care and said straightforwardly without lowering her voice. Hearing her words, the boy walking in front couldn't help but tremble. It seemed that he was a little injured. What kind of car do you want to buy? However, he still took everyone into the exhibition hall, but when he spoke again, his tone was a little cold. It would be strange if he was happy that karma didn't give him face. In this regard, Jiang Hai just smiled. Love in high school was just like that. The matter of being snubbed would always happen from time to time. Obviously, this young man was like that. But when the child saw the expression on Jiang Hai's face, his body couldn't help but tremble again. He thought that Jiang Hai was laughing at him, which made him a little angry, but in line with the principle that Jiang Hai came to buy a car. So although he didn't like Jiang Hai, he still didn't lose his temper. Instead, he continued to stand here, but his eyes were already looking into the distance. I want to buy. Jiang Hai didn't observe the boy's thoughts, but he was really going to buy a car. But before he finished speaking, he saw the boy bluntly say something to Jiang Hai, then quickly ran away. It turned out that at this time, at the front door in the distance, a middle-aged man with a bulging belly just walked in. When he saw this guy, the boy's eyes suddenly lit up. Please wait a moment. At the moment, the boy didn't want to let Jiang Hai finish his words. After bluntly saying something to Jiang Hai, he quickly left. Looking at the guy's back, not to mention Jiang Hai, even SH-20 Clive and Karma Cliff were stunned. What does this mean? Looking at the boy running away, SH-20 Clive said with some dissatisfaction, "Oh, our family's little Karma doesn't want to be his girlfriend. Then he is not going to waste his time on us poor people." Watching the boy run to the fat man's side, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He didn't expect that the melodramatic plot he had seen in novels before would happen to him one day. But he is not a nouveau riche who has just become rich. In this case, he must talk, act pretentious, and slap his face. After a few months of settling down, Jiang Hai doesn't care much about this. Since the boy wants to go, let him go. The car Jiang Hai wants to buy this time is definitely not cheap. Since he is not willing to earn this commission, it has nothing to do with him. This guy, I'll catch him back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma's little face couldn't help but blush. Such a big child. What he cares about most is his face. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Karma felt that he was going crazy. This damn Lewis is so realistic. It seems that I should have rejected him at the beginning. Well, it doesn't matter. Let's just find another shopping guide. Hey, the girl over there, come here. Looking at Karma, angrily going to find this guy to settle accounts, Jiang Hai smiled. He didn't want to slap his face. He came here to buy a car, not to get angry. Of course, if someone takes the initiative to ask for a slap in the face, he will still slap it. So after persuading Karma, Jiang Hai said to a girl who had just come over with a stack of documents. This stack of documents is really not an ordinary Hai. It is smaller than 1 meter, and the girl is still a short one, about 1.6 meters, walking crookedly. Just as she passed by here, Jiang Hai stopped her. Me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl here couldn't help but stop in place and said with some surprise, "Yes, it's you. You're a staff member here. If you have time, please introduce me to the cars here. I want to buy a few cars." Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai nodded and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl was also shocked. She immediately found a place and piled the stack of documents in the distance, then patted her clothes and trotted over. "Oh, I'm a staff member here and also a shopping guide here. My name is Lu Qing." Looking at Jiang Hai and his party, the girl immediately introduced herself. When she introduced herself, Jiang Hai was also looking at her. This girl named Lu Qing looks to be in her early 20s, with very light makeup on her face. She is only 1.6 meters tall, maybe less than that. Wearing the staff's clothes, she does look a bit out of place, but she is still very cute. A face that is obviously Asian also made Jiang Hai have a good impression of her. "Are you from Huaxia?" After hearing the girl's introduction, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask her. "Well, yes, I am an international student from Huaxia. You speak Chinese? Are you also from Huaxia?" Hearing the fluent Mandarin coming out of Jiang Hai's mouth, the girl asked with some surprise. "Ah, yes, what a coincidence. My name is Jiang Hai, and the two ladies beside me are Shinny Clive and Karma Cliff." Hearing the other party also speak Mandarin, Jiang Hai felt very familiar and couldn't help but smile and say, "Yes, what a coincidence. I don't know what kind of car you want to buy. Although I am from Huaxia, I have to admit that the quality of the cars here is better than those in our country, and the price is much lower than that in China. Seeing that Jiang Hai was easy to talk to, the girl couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and then asked him with a smile. Touching his chin, Jiang Hai thought about the kind of car he wanted, and then said, "I want a sedan, an SUV, and an MVP. For the time being, I want these 3 cars." Wow, this is a big deal. I'm not afraid that you will laugh at me. This is my first time dealing with a business. Haha, this place is very close to the car area. I will take you to see it first. Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted to buy 3 cars, the girl named Lu Qing was a little surprised, but then she understood and led Jiang Hai and others to the car area in the distance. On the other side, Louis, while talking with the fat man, had been looking at Jiang Hai. When he saw that Jiang Hai was following Lu Qing, he couldn't help but snort disdainfully. In order to pursue Karma Cliff, he also had some general understanding of the situation of Clive's family. Clive's man was a French chef, but because of an accident a few years ago, he was forced to retire. Karma and Sandy's mother was a housewife, and Shinny Clive was an ordinary county elementary school teacher. Such a family naturally didn't have much money. According to his estimation, this time it was very likely that Shinny Clive came to buy a car, or to buy a car for Karma Cliff. No matter who bought it, the price wouldn't be high. A car that cost $10,000 or $20,000 was really not worth much here. Their commission was only a few $100s, so it was fine to not make a profit. As for Jiang Hai, well, from the beginning, he didn't take Jiang Hai too seriously. Although Jiang Hai's clothes weren't bad, they weren't very good either. Obviously, it didn't match his imagination of a rich person. Rich people's clothes should at least be branded, and Jiang Hai was wearing a mountain lion coat. How could he recognize it? So he unconsciously let go of such a big commission for Jiang Hai. If he estimated it, would he cry in the toilet? Chapter 224. Not to mention Louis over there, just Jiang Hai's side. As he followed the girl to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai asked her casually, "Are you studying here? Which university are you in?" "I'm in Harvard Pharmaceutical School. I'm a junior this year." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl also said with a smile, "Pharmaceutical school?" Hearing the girl say pharmaceutical school, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be surprised. He didn't question this university. As long as the sign of Harvard hangs in front, it means that this university is definitely the top in the world. Even Harvard University's excavator department can rank in the top 5 excavator departments in the world. The only one that can compete with it is the legendary flying basket. What he felt a little surprised is that this girl, as a member of the pharmaceutical school and a member of Harvard Pharmaceutical School, would come here to sell cars. How can she do this? "I can't do it. There's no other way. I'm an exchange student. I studied in China until my sophomore year. The rest of my time is here, but my student status is still in China, so there's no way for the department to give me a working or internship certificate. I can only find other jobs. Although the commission is not much, I have a base salary of $200 per week, which is enough for me to live." As if seeing Jiang Hai's confusion, LV Qing couldn't help but explain with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded. "Indeed, it's not easy for a foreigner to work here. By the way, I listened to your accent. It seems that you are from the north. Where are you from? Beijing or somewhere else?" "I'm from Lu Province." Seeing Jiang Hai understand, Lu Qing also turned her head and asked Jiang Hai, "Oh, I'm from Bingsheng, not Beijing." Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "Bingsheng? Northeast? Why don't you have a northeast accent?" Lu Qing was a little surprised when Jiang Hai said that he was from Bingsheng. The 3 provinces in the northeast don't all have accents. Seeing the girl's puzzled look, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a smile, "The so-called northeastern accent was actually most concentrated in Liao province, where the northeastern accent was the strongest. Further north, in Ji province, the accent became lighter. Further north, in the vicinity of Bing City, the people there spoke almost the same as Mandarin, except for some slang words. But other than these slang words, the rest of the words were basically the same as standard Mandarin." Jiang Hai once had a friend from Yin province. When they went out to play, Jiang Hai called his mother, who was still alive at that time. His friend was extremely surprised and said to him, "Why are you speaking Mandarin when you call your mother?" Hearing this, Jiang Hai was stunned. This was because the people there spoke in Mandarin. Seeing Jiang Hai and LV Qing chatting happily, Sandy and Karma behind Jiang Hai and LV Qing became a bit depressed. Because they didn't understand Chinese, Sandy could still bear it. But Karma couldn't bear it. She couldn't help but pull Jiang Hai's sleeve and look at him with a pair of big eyes, motioning him to translate. In this regard, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and translated the conversation between him and LV Qing. When Karma heard that LV Qing came from Harvard Medical School, she was extremely surprised and talked to her with a happy face. It turned out that Karma wanted to go to this school the most. In the United States, the social status of doctors was very high. The commoner professions with the highest income were medicine and lawyer. Although these two professions were nothing in the eyes of some tycoons and rich people, in the eyes of ordinary people, these two professions were extremely lucrative. The conditions in Clive's family were not bad, but not good either. In addition, Karma Cliff's academic performance was really good, so it was understandable that she wanted to study medicine. While the two were asking and answering, unknowingly, they had walked to the car exhibition hall. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai felt that his eyes were suddenly open. In this large hall, there were hundreds of cars of various models and brands. After all, this was the largest car sales point in Winthrop. At the same time, it also served as a warehouse for the car sales center in Boston. The buildings in the Boston area were narrow and small. Even in a 4S store, the place to store the cars would not be too big. Compared with the urban area of Boston, the surrounding places were much larger. Although LV Qing had hardly sold a car, she still had the posture. After all, she had been trained. With Jiang Hai and his party, she came to the front of several cars and introduced them. Walking into a car, LV Qing said helplessly, "Although I don't want to admit it, the price difference between the domestic cars and the cars here is indeed a bit too big. Let's not talk about the quality first. Just the price difference is too big." After I sold the car, I also looked up some information about the price difference of domestic cars on the internet. TSK. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let me introduce you first. Actually, if you want to buy a car, the best is the Japanese. Although I know that Mr. Jiang probably hates Japanese cars, this is the most cost-effective. If it's just a means of transportation, these cars are very good. According to the requirements of work, LV Qing began to introduce the few cars around her. This is a Toyota Camry. The starting price of the low-spec car is $22,425, which is about 130,000 yuan. However, in China, it sells for 179,800 yuan. The higher spec car is $28,625, which is about 174,000 yuan. In China, it sells for 329,800 yuan. This is a Honda Accord. The starting price here is $21,680, and the highest spec car is $29,115. In China, the lower spec car sells for 200,000 yuan, and the higher spec car sells for 300,000 yuan. This is a Mazda 6. The starting price is $20,990, which is about 127,700 yuan. In China, it sells for more than 170,000 yuan. The Xuanyi is $15,990, and the Corolla is $16,800. The American cars here are even cheaper. Listening to Lu Qing's introduction, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. Well, these low-level cars were basically sold here. They were about one-third cheaper than those sold in China. Whether it was Japanese or American, it was the same. However, the Korean cars, such as Kia and some Hyundai models, were about the same price as those sold in China. Some of the lower spec cars were even cheaper in China than here, which puzzled Jiang Hai. However, he did not come here to buy these cars, so he waved his hand and interrupted LV Qing's words. "I'm not here to buy these cars. Please introduce me to a high-end car." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, LV Qing, who was still talking, could not help but stop and look at Jiang Hai with some surprise. Because she did not see Jiang Hai as a rich man, But Jiang Hai had a request, so she could only comply. She took Jiang Hai and the other two to the middle part. This is the Volkswagen Touareg 13 model. It has a 3.6-liter engine and 280 horsepower. It's considered a premium car in China. The starting price of this car is $910,000 in China, but it starts at $43,995 here, which is $600,000 cheaper than in China. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but choke. Well, buying a car in China is more than buying three here. I want a better one. After thinking about it, this is not China after all. A car worth $1,000,000 in China is indeed very attractive, and it is enough to pick people up, but this is the United States after all. Buying a car less than $100,000 to pick people up is shameful. Then this is the BMW 740 Li, 13, 6 liters, twin-turbo, 544 horsepower. The starting price of this is $141,200, and it should be sold at 2.56 million yuan in China. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl also reported mechanically, 141,200, which is more than 800,000 yuan, while another triple the price. Is there a better one? After calculating in his heart, Jiang Hai felt that it was better to look at a better one. Besides, he was not short of money now. The best are the three top recreational cars: Bentley, Maybach, and Rolls-Royce. Since you want to ask, I won't introduce you to the European cars. This is the Bentley Mulsanne 11.6 8T Deluxe version. It is sold for $298,900 here, and it should be sold at 5.25 million yuan in China. Hearing LV Qing's words, Jiang Hai had already done the conversion habitually. This is more reliable. Why? It is not triple. $300,000 is about 1.85 million yuan, which is more than twice the price. If it is not triple the price difference, it is not too bad, at least in Jiang Hai's opinion. This is the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The convertible is $469,900, and it should be sold at 8 million yuan in China. The price difference is about 5 million yuan, but you want a recreational car. We have a normal one here. The extended version is also $469,900, and it should be sold at 7.98 million yuan in China. The non-extended version is $369,900. The Maybach is not available now. If you want to see it, we can go outside and see. But basically, the Maybach is about the same as these two cars. After introducing the Bentley, LV Qing began to introduce the Rolls-Royce. Then I'll take the extended one, this one. Jiang Hai was too lazy to calculate the price difference in the middle. What a scam. He had to admit that the comparison between the domestic and overseas car prices was really high. In the past, people always said that domestic cars were expensive because of the high customs tax, which was 40%. Now it seems that even if the tax was 40%, it would not be so expensive. A car worth 1 million. Even if the customs tax was 40%, it would only be 1.4 million yuan, but it would be sold at 1 million yuan in China. Is this because of the tax? It seems that technology is the way to go. They sell it at whatever price I say. TSK. How shameless. Chapter 225. In addition to cars, Jiang Hai also took a look at SUVs, which were off-road vehicles. The so-called SUV translated to suburban multi-purpose vehicles. Now, it was basically divided into two types. One was the pure off-road type, such as the famous Wrangler series, and the other was the urban SUV. This kind of SUV had no problem going to the countryside and the suburbs, but it may not be able to go to other places. Since Jiang Hai had already bought a car and was going to buy an MPV, there was no need to buy an urban SUV. After Lu Qing's introduction, Jiang Hai found that in addition to off-road SUVs, such as the Wrangler and the Mercedes-Benz AMG, there was another type of SUV called the civilian armored vehicle. And in these cars, many of them were ones that Jiang Hai had seen before. For example, when he went into the mountains last time, Paul and the others drove many of these SUVs. Among them, the most famous and the cheapest was the Land Rover Guardian. In addition to the Guardian, There were two cars that Jiang Hai didn't recognize. One of them was called the Renault Sherpa, which was a car produced by a French company. The other was a car produced by Soviet Russia, called the GAZ, the Tiger Armored SUV. However, the car that Jiang Hai bought was not these cars. Maybe people at his age were not very interested in those old cars. So, although he also bought the best car, it cost him nearly 500,000 yuan, plus tax. But when he bought this armored SUV, he spent more money. This car could buy 3 Rolls-Royces. This car was called the Coburg Shield, which was ranked the second strongest armored SUV in the world. It was divided into a combat version, 3-compartment, and a command version, 2-compartment. Its bulletproof level was also divided into 3 types. From the lowest B6 can easily defend against rifles and AK, to B7 may defend against sniper rifles and large caliber rifles, to NATO can defend against shotguns, machine guns, anti-tank rifles, and anti-material sniper rifles. It just so happened that Jiang Hai was still a little worried about himself recently. With this car, he naturally felt more at ease. However, the price of this car was also very interesting. It was the best-equipped NATO-grade bulletproof car, and it cost 20 million renminbi in China. The asking price here was $7,388 million, $359 million for AB7, and $990,000 for AB6. Of course, that was the price of the fruit car. If he wanted to buy one, he would have to pay insurance, car tax, purchase tax, and usage tax. The most expensive car even cost $2 million. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't mind spending $500,000 on a car. After all, he had just earned more than 10 million, but if he had to spend 2 million to buy a car, he would feel a little heartache. After all, he had spent a long time in the water to earn the money. He was reluctant to spend a fraction of the money on a car. Most importantly, he still had to prepare the money to develop his own winery. But after considering his own safety, Jiang Hai decided that if he didn't make one, he would make one of the best ones. There was only a month left until the New York Beef Show. He believed that with his money, it wouldn't be a problem for him to survive for a month. This one, a NATO-grade one. Gritting his teeth, Jiang Hai said these words. When they heard these words, not only was LV Qing dumbfounded, but also Karmacliff and SH-20 Clive. They really didn't think that Jiang Hai would be so generous. However, this money was all Jiang Hai's, and they couldn't control it. Besides, Jiang Hai was also considering his own safety. Although it was a little scary to spend so much money, it was still acceptable. Okay, I'll write it down for you. Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted this car, LV Qing was very surprised, but she still nodded professionally and wrote down Jiang Hai's request. A car of this level was basically custom-made. Perhaps because he spent too much money on this SUV, Jiang Hai also had some heartache. Therefore, when he bought the MPV, Jiang Hai went easy on it and didn't buy a car that was too expensive. A Ford 6-door, 7-seat E350 became his means of transportation. However, although this car wasn't very good, it could be sold for more than 1 million yuan in China. It was worth more than $100,000 here. Although it was a lot less expensive than the cars in front, it was still considered a high-end car. When Jiang Hai chose these cars, he directly paid the full amount. When paying, he also met the manager he met when he came to buy a car last time. Because Jiang Hai didn't need a loan and didn't need to pay in installments, he directly paid in full. So the manager also decided to give Jiang Hai a 5% discount. Although the discount wasn't too much, it made Jiang Hai's heart feel a little more comfortable. At least he had the money to pay taxes and license fees. With the swipe of Jiang Hai's card, a fraction of his property instantly said goodbye to him. But considering that he didn't earn any more money, he wasn't so sad. When the news spread, Karma's classmate was accompanying the fat man to look at cars. The fat man was going to buy a car for his wife as a wedding gift, but the car he picked was also about $70,000. Although $70,000 was a lot, compared with Jiang Hai's car, which added up to more than $2 million, it was really a lot worse. Thinking about the commission, LV Qing estimated that the money this time was enough for her to eat and drink well here for the rest of her college life. The boy named Louis felt his vision go black. He really didn't see that Jiang Hai turned out to be a rich man. This time, he really accompanied his wife and lost soldiers. When he was about to run out and explain to Jiang Hai had already paid the money, went to the parking lot, and drove away. Because the cars he ordered all needed to be hand-built, there was no stock now. He could only wait for the main factory to finish and then send it over, which would take half a month. However, Jiang Hai had nothing to do in half a month, so it didn't matter. After half a month, the car company would send the car directly to his manor. After confirming the delivery date, Jiang Hai left with the two girls. As for Louis, they had long forgotten about him. With the roar of the car, Jiang Hai and others quickly returned to the manor this time. After parking the car in the parking lot, Little Huang, Xiao Bai, Dai Teeth, and Chirps, who were more willing to play outside, ran over from distance because it was already spring. They were too familiar with Jiang Hai's voice and smell. "Hey, good dog, good dog." As soon as they saw Jiang Hai jump out of the car, Little Huang and Xiao Bai had already rushed over, constantly rubbing their heads against Jiang Hai's trousers and licking Jiang Hai's outstretched hand with their tongues. Jiang Hai also rubbed their heads after grabbing their butts. Unlike Little Huang and Xiao Bai, Dai Teeth and Chirps were not as fast as these two guys. Since Dai Teeth absorbed Jiang Hai's blood, his body was now much bigger than before. However, unlike the average fat dog, this guy was very strong. He used to climb trees very fast, but now he was even faster. Moreover, his strength was not small. It was precisely because he was getting heavier that Xiao Bai was no longer willing to carry him. He didn't care and still ran behind the two dogs every day. Chirp's situation was similar to Dai Teeth's. Now, the feathers on its body were almost fully grown. This kind of growth speed was somewhat supernatural. Logically speaking, Chirp should be about 5 months old, but it didn't look like it was 5 months old. Instead, it looked like it had grown up. The feathers on its head had basically turned white, and the feathers on its body were very hard. It was basically fully grown. Ji Zhan opened it up and saw that it was almost a meter long. Although it had not reached adulthood, it was already pretty good. Of course, it couldn't fly yet, but it had already shown that it liked the surrounding environment. Every day, when it had nothing to do, it would run around the manor with its 3 big brothers, Xiao Bai, Little Huang, and Dai Teeth. Even though this fellow had wings, it was the slowest one to run. Furthermore, it was very fun to jump around. While the two dogs were clinging to Jiang Hai, Dai Teeth and Chirps also ran over, but they didn't immediately jump into Jiang Hai's arms. Instead, they stood in place and looked at Shinny Clive and Karmacliff, who came back with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's animals were very smart, and their IQs were at least as high as a 5 or 6-year-old child. They naturally knew Shinny Clive, but they didn't know Karmacliff, so they looked at her with some vigilance. "Wow, what a big dog and a big squirrel. What is this, an eagle?" On the contrary, when they saw Karmacliff, they were vigilant, but when Karmacliff saw them, she was full of joy and immediately shouted loudly. While talking, she walked over, wanted to get closer to the two little guys, but when she just took a step, Dai Teeth had already jumped away from his original position and rushed to Xiao Bai in a few strides, squeaking at Xiao Bai. Chirps also jumped a few steps away from Karmacliff. Just when Karmacliff was curious, suddenly the two docile dogs beside Jiang Hai were in a state of anger. Xiao Bai's body straightened, and its sharp canine teeth were exposed at this time, making a warning sound. As for Xiao Bai, although it didn't make a sound, it lowered its body. If there were people who were familiar with animals, they would know that when an animal's body is stretched forward to make itself look big, it's actually more to scare others. But when an animal tries to shrink itself as much as possible, it means that it's going to attack. When Jiang Hai saw Xiao Bai and Goldie's movements, he immediately gave them a kick each. "What are you shouting for? This is Karmacliff, Teacher Xanthi's sister. Go play somewhere else." Chapter 226. When they heard that she was Shite Clive's sister, the animal's vigilant expressions instantly disappeared. Even Buck Teeth, who had complained just now, deliberately ran to her side and showed a flattering smile. As for Xiao Bai, it sat on the same spot and continued to look at Buck Teeth. Buck Teeth was the one who said that he wanted to fight. and now he was the one who wanted to flatter others. It was a little confused. As for Chirpy, it stretched its neck and looked at them with a puzzled expression. Perhaps it was difficult for it to understand Buck Teeth's wretchedness because it had not fully grown yet. Little Yellow was cold after all. After glancing at Karma Cliff indifferently, it turned around and walked away. Seeing that their boss had left, the lackeys also stopped fooling around. They all let out a strange cry and ran off with Goldie. Okay, come in. It's your first time here, so they don't recognize you. You can come again in the future. At this time, Karma Cliff still hadn't recovered from the frightened cries of the animals. Seeing her like this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This girl seemed to be fearless, but he didn't expect her to be so timid. Your animals are so smart. If your 2 dogs give birth to puppies, remember to leave one for me. But obviously, Jiang Hai was thinking too much. For a girl of this age, it was impossible to scare her unless she was bitten by a dog. Otherwise, this was the age when one was most forgetful, and so was Karma Karev. Ahem, come in. Hearing Karma Cliff's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. You want the offspring of these 2 guys? Just wait. Seeing Jiang Hai walk to the villa in front of him and open the door, Shite Clive also pulled his sister in. However, Karma Cliff was obviously very interested in Jiang Hai's manor. Before coming, she also took a look at Jiang Hai's manor outside. She had to admit that Jiang Hai's manor was very beautiful, especially now that it was early spring, the sky was blue, and the ocean in the distance was also blue. In the middle of the blue, it was like a green sandwich. The pasture was located here, and from afar, one could see large herds of cattle and sheep coming and going on the pasture. The feeling of cattle and sheep in the wind made Karma Cliff want to play here, but her sister was here today, so she could only forget about it. At the same time, she made up her mind that she would come and play with Jiang Hai the next time she had a break. But when she walked into the villa, she had just made up her mind, but she couldn't help but waver, because at this moment, there were already many girls sitting in the living room of the villa, chattering happily. She glanced at these girls. Most of them were about the same age as her. Some were a bit older than her, but not much older. There were also 2 who were obviously much younger than her. When these girls saw Jiang Hai come in, some of them were brimming with happy smiles. However, when they saw her and her sister, most of them froze. Only the 2 youngest girls, who looked like a pair of sisters, bloomed with the happiest smile. This made Karma Cliff a bit uneasy. This Jiang Hai can't be a pervert, right? He actually has so many girls, and they all look quite beautiful. Looking at these girls, Karma Cliff couldn't help but whisper her heart. Her determination to come here instantly disappeared. You're all here. I miss Daliana and Marion a bit today, so I came to see them and teach them at the same time. Are you guys interested in learning together? But unlike Karma Cliff, Shinny Clive obviously knew about the existence of these girls, because for her, she also understood and sympathized with these girls' pasts. When Jiang Hai Gang brought them here, he had already told her about it. Moreover, she had come here so many times, and sometimes she would see these girls, so she was not unfamiliar with them. However, these girls seemed to be a little afraid of her. No, we'll leave first. Lunch break is almost over. We still have work to do later. Hearing Shinny Clive's words, Aphrodite, who was sitting closest to the door, stood up and smiled at her. Seeing her gesture, the 7 girls who were still sitting there also stood up. After smiling at Shinny Clive, they nodded at Jiang Hai, then picked up their jackets and walked out. Shinny Clive also understood that these girls were unwilling to have too much contact with her. She knew that now was not the time to force it. Her main students were still Daliana and Marion. After watching the 8 girls leave, Daliana and Marion also jumped up and threw themselves into Shinny Clive's arms, but they were a little wary of Karma Cliff standing behind Shinny Clive. Okay, let me introduce you. This is Karma Cliff, teacher Xanthi's sister. Today she came to our house as a guest. You have to get along well. Have you had lunch? Looking at the 2 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai hung his jacket at the door and asked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 2 girls glanced at Karma Cliff and then gestured. Jiang Hai knew that it meant that they had eaten. Thinking about it, if he wasn't around, these two girls would go to Mrs. Phillips' place to eat. Secondly, with Aphrodite and the other girls around, they wouldn't starve. Although these girls didn't have much cooking experience before, they had been in the manor for a few months after all. In the beginning, they indeed only knew how to cook the food. As for whether it tasted good was another matter. After all, they couldn't even fill their stomachs in the past. But after cooking for a few months, although their cooking skills weren't very good, it was still not bad. They liked to curry favor with Jiang Hai, and Dalian and Marian were the most important link between them and Jiang Hai. No matter what, they would completely stand behind the two girls and be on the same side with them. Okay, you sit here and watch TV first. I'll go prepare lunch. Your teacher Xanthi, Miss Karma, and I haven't eaten yet. Hearing the two girls' words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Originally, on the way, he said that he would invite the two girls to Winthrop. But Karma Cliff said that she wanted to eat Jiang Hai's steak. Although Jiang Hai didn't cook well, he still agreed. I'll go help. Seeing Jiang Hai put away his clothes, he went to the cold storage next to him and took out a piece of beef I'd prepare to cook. On the other side, Shy Clive was still discussing learning with the two girls. Karma Cliff, who didn't want to watch TV, couldn't help but turn her eyes. After saying something to the three, she ran into the kitchen. What's wrong? Hungry? Don't worry, it'll be ready in a while. Seeing Karma Cliff coming in, Jiang Hai marinated the steak and said to her, he didn't prepare a lot of food for lunch. Cheddar soup, grilled steak, fried cod, fried meatballs, and a salad. The staple food was bread, which Jiang Hai always had. No, I'm here to help. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff walked over with a smile. She washed her hands, took the initiative to pick up the vegetables that Jiang Hai had taken out, and prepare to wash them. Don't bother. How can I let the guest do it? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai immediately waved his hand. Haha, no. You and my sister are the same age. But it doesn't matter. We didn't bring you any gifts, so it's only right that we help prepare. Don't look down on me. I helped my dad before. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff didn't say anything else and directly started to prepare. She didn't lie. When she was young, when her father was still in the Western restaurant, in addition to cooking the dishes ordered by the guests, he also had to cook the dishes eaten by the people in the Western restaurant. At that time, Karma Cliff, who was still young, learned to cut vegetables in order to earn pocket money. Watching Karma, Karev wash the vegetables and the like, her knife skills were really good. Jiang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He continued to cook his steak. He really didn't see that Karma, this little girl, had this skill. Hey, I say, are you interested in my sister? Turning her head and looking at Jiang Hai, who was cooking in the sun, Karma Cliff said to Jiang Hai while cutting things. Well, I can't say that I'm interested, but I admit that I do have some feelings for your sister. Hearing Karma Cliff's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but choke and said a little awkwardly, Like is like, don't like is don't like. What do you mean have some feelings? You Orientals are moji, but let me say the ugly words first. You should also have some understanding of my sister's situation. What she hates most is people who are unfaithful to their marriage. You see, there's so many beauties in your manner, but you still dare to be so blatant. I'm not very optimistic about you. When Karma Cliff said this, her eyes were always looking at Jiang Hai, wanting to see what expression he had. But it seemed that after hearing her words, Jiang Hai's face did not flash a look of panic, shyness, or hesitation. Instead, it was as if nothing had happened. Oh, you mean those girls just now? Those girls are deaf and mute because, for some reason, they were recruited by me as employees. Don't I have a winery? I haven't found a suitable winemaker yet, so I haven't started work yet. As for Delina and Marian, they're my daughters. Your sister knows this. I have nothing to do with them. Although Jiang Hai is not a good person, at least he has principles. How can a rabbit eat the grass near its nest? Winemaker? If you really want to make wine, I have a good candidate. At this time, Karma's eyes lit up. Chapter 227. Sis, tell me the truth. Do you have a chance with Jiang Hai? Karma Cliff, who was lying on Shtwini Clive's big bed, looked at her sister who was sitting at the desk looking at a gold coin and said with some dissatisfaction, "Cough. What do you mean by a chance? What do you know?" Hearing her sister's words, Clive's face flashed a trace of unnaturalness. Then she put the gold coin that Jiang Hai just gave her into her treasure chest. Although this gold coin was not expensive, it was the first thing that Jiang Hai gave her, so she must treasure it well. Today, the two sisters had 2 meals at Jiang Hai's house, lunch and dinner. Because although there were a lot of police near Jiang Hai's house, he was still in a state of being watched by others. So Jiang Hai did not let the two stay too late. After dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening, he sent the two back. If they were late, for their safety, Jiang Hai might let them stay in the manor overnight. "Sis, do you really think I'm a child? I'm already 18 years old. I'm about to graduate from high school and enter university." Hearing Clive's words, Clive looked at her contemptuously and said to her. Hearing her sister's words, Clive remembered that her sister seemed to have unknowingly grown up. At least now, legally, she has the right to make decisions and have a heart-to-heart talk with her. "Actually, Jiang Hai, and I don't have a chance, but I admit that I have a good impression of him. After all, if you get to know this man, you'll find that he is really good." Gently turning around and looking at her sister, Clive also expressed her thoughts in front of her family for the first time. "Yeah, if I didn't go to his house, I also feel that he is good. He looks a little innocent. He has a good height and a good physique. Although he is not too handsome, he is very manly. Most importantly, he is rich." Hearing her sister's words, Clive also analyzed Jiang Hai's situation. Hearing her sister's words, Clive's face couldn't help but blush, and at the same time, she slowly said, "And I feel that he seems to be very concerned about me, but maybe we are both very careful, so I don't know what the situation is now. I knew you two would be like this. That's enough. But sis, do you really think that Jiang Hai is nothing? The 10 girls in his manor. Let's not talk about Delina and Marion first. After all, they are his daughters in name. And it seems that he takes care of these 2 girls very well, so he shouldn't have any other thoughts. But do those girls have nothing to do with him?" Seeing that Clive seemed to be falling in her own dream, Clive couldn't help but sit up and say with a serious face. In her view, Aphrodite and the others were her sister's biggest opponents. In fact, they were rescued together with Delina and Marion, but unlike Delina and Marion, they had been in the water for a long time at that time. The reason why I'm not worried is mainly because of Jiang Hai's personality. Maybe you don't know, but Jiang Hai himself is a clean freak. I don't know if he's going to play, but if he wants to get married, these girls who have been in that profession before will definitely not be his choice. Looking at her sister, Clive also smiled. Since she was somewhat concerned about Jiang Hai, naturally, she was also very concerned about the girls who appeared around Jiang Hai. The reason why she didn't care about Aphrodite and the others appearing around Jiang Hai was mainly because Jiang Hai told her about his habits. After all, Jiang Hai was not 17 or 18, but in his early 20s. He wouldn't be so naive to think that all the girls in the world who were close to him had their first time, so he didn't expect his other half to be the kind of person. Of course, it would be even better if it was. But at least it shouldn't be so dirty that it would make his heart ache. Just like a spoon, if one person licked it, maybe Jiang Hai could accept it, but if 10,000 people licked it and there was no way to brush it, then Jiang Hai couldn't stand it and could only stay away. In Clive's eyes, these girls belong to the spoon that 10,000 people licked. There is no threat. Really? Did those girls really work in that profession before? It doesn't look like it. Those girls didn't seem to have done it yet. Hearing her sister's explanation, Clive said a little strangely, "How do you know?" Hearing her sister's words, Clive also smiled. She likes to think blindly. "Of course, because I'm the same. You don't know, the girls who haven't done it can be seen. Well, it seems that you don't want to know." Seeing her sister turn her head when she heard her words, Clive couldn't help but wave her fist in hatred. This guy is too hateful. Doesn't he know that I'm worried about her? Our teacher said that there is a saying in the distant East that you may know a person's face, but not his heart. Sister, I think it's better for you to be careful, so I specially arranged an informant for you today. But after all, they are sisters. Clive looked at Clive's appearance, she couldn't help but move closer and say with a mysterious face, "Informant?" Hearing her words, this time it was 20 Clive's turn to be surprised. When did this guy learn how to be an agent? Yeah, an informant. Looking at her sister's surprised look, Karma Cliff also laughed. When the clock pointed to 9 o'clock in the morning the next day, two men appeared in Jiang Hai's manor. Looking at the two men, Jiang Hai's first impression was very good. After shaking hands with the two men, he warmly invited them to sit down. "Hello. Sit anywhere. Don't be polite." When the three of them sat down, Jiang Hai also went to make 2 cups of coffee and brought it to the two men. The two men were flattered by Jiang Hai's hospitality. While respectfully receiving the coffee, they also looked at Jiang Hai. While they were looking at Jiang Hai was also looking at them. The two men were old and middle-aged. The old man looked about 60 years old. He was about 175 meters tall. He was not fat and had a medium build. He had silver white hair, but his face was not like the average Westerners. When he got older, there were more wrinkles on his face. There were wrinkles on his face, but they were few. The most conspicuous thing was his high nose, which was really too high. To be honest, Jiang Hai had stayed in Boston for so long, and he rarely saw such a big nose and such a high nose. As for the middle-aged man next to him, he was a typical white man with blonde hair and a slightly serious face, which made him look a little fierce. He sat there more like a soldier than a brewer. These two men were Karma Cliff's informants. "This must be Mr. Gerard. He looks younger than the voice on the phone. I heard from Miss Karma Cliff that you should be French." Sitting on the sofa opposite, Jiang Hai took a sip of tea in front of him, then asked the old man. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man also nodded. "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Dulles Gerard. To be exact, I should be a French-American. My grandfather's generation was French, but when it came to my father's generation, they immigrated to the United States. But when I was young, I returned to France. This is O'Connor Murphy, my assistant, and also a master white wine brewer." Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man introduced himself and the people around him. In fact, before they came, Jiang Hai also had some understanding of them. According to Karma Cliff, Dulles Gerard is a very outstanding wine brewer. From planting, maintenance, brewing, and sugar extraction, he is a rare master. When he was young, he used to make wine in the Burgundy region of France. His manor has won a lot of praise in internationally renowned competitions, such as the Brussels International Wine Competition, the Magna Wine Competition, the Bordeaux Aquitaine Wine Competition, the Wine Grand Prix, and other international competitions. He has won a total of 27 gold medals in his life. It can be said that his reputation is extremely resounding in the vicinity of France. The reason why he was familiar with Clive's family was mainly because of Karma Cliff's father. At that time, he went to France to learn how to cook. One of them cooked, and the other made red wine. They were a perfect match, so they became good friends. Later, after Karma Cliff's father finished his apprenticeship, he went to South America. The reason why he later settled in Boston was also because of Dulles Gerard, because he lived in Boston after retirement. The reason why he was now ready to leave the mountain was that Jiang Hai's environment was good, and the food was good. It was equivalent to go to another place for a vacation. The second reason was because the business he invested in recently collapsed, and his savings were somewhat unable to make ends meet. As for O'Connor Murphy, who was next to him, he was a German born in the town of Wittingen, Germany, which is also the home of white wine. When it comes to German red wine, it is not good, but when it comes to their white wine, it is the world's first. O'Connor Murphy has been exposed to winemaking since he was a child. When he was young, he once won the gold medal in the Magna Wine Competition. However, after meeting Dulles Gerard, he became his assistant. Over the years, the two of them were like teachers and fathers, and they lived a good life. Before that, he worked at the Boston Wine Tasting Conference. When he learned that his teacher was going to leave the mountain, he came together. After talking, Jiang Hai was very satisfied with the two of them. Gerard was experienced, and his own level was good. O'Connor Murphy was rigorous and also quite experienced. Jiang Hai believed that with the two of them and his own aura, it would be strange if the wine of his manor was not good. He was already looking forward to the wine sales of the winery. Chapter 228. Time always passes inexplicably fast. When he was young, he always looked forward to Saturdays and Sundays, looking forward to rest and holidays. But after he became an adult, the feeling of passing days as if they were years gradually disappeared, especially when there was no pressure, no motivation, and nothing else to do. Time always passed very quickly. There was a very good word to describe it: swaying. It feels like time is moving, and a long time has passed in a flash. Jiang Hai now feels that his life is very shaky, so shaky that he almost has no concept of the so-called date and time. Because Jiang Hai's life is basically the same every day. After waking up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, he washes up, makes breakfast, and then goes for a run. This is not really a morning run. It can only be said to be exercise. After coming back, he may go to the cowshed in the morning to take care of Xiao Xia and take it out to ride 2 laps. At noon, he will go home for lunch, and in the afternoon, he will either stay at home or go out to play by boat. Of course, Jiang Hai's so-called play is mainly diving. At present, Jiang Hai's physical fitness is twice that of a human. In the sea, he can already explore it, but after all, he is still very timid. Although he can ignore the water pressure, his swimming speed in the water is much faster than the average person, but it is still a lot slower than a fish. Although he is escorted by the Shah, if he encounters a big shark or a whale, it will be troublesome. So he just plays in his own fish farm and the open sea around his fish farm. When he was in the fish farm, Jiang Hai also injected a lot of spirit energy into the water plants in his fish farm. At this time, if someone were to go down to the sea to check the aquatic plants in the Jiang Hai fishery, they would be surprised to find that it was almost impossible for these plants to have been planted for just a few months. The spiritual energy in the Jiang Hai fishery had a much greater effect on the growth of plants than animals. Jiang Hai's current aquatic plants were almost like aquatic plants that had been growing for 5 or 6 years. It was very lush. Among these aquatic plants, there are a lot of shellfish, lobsters, king crabs, spotted shrimps, and geoduck clams raised by Jiang Hai. However, these things are still in their infancy state, but their survival rate is quite high. Jiang Hai's group above the water plants, there are a lot of cuttlefish, octopus, and so on. These things also grow very fast. Further up, there are the fish raised by Jiang Hai, such as salmon, American redfish, and longzhu. Although these guys are in the state of young seedlings, they're still bigger than cuttlefish and octopus, and they feed on these things. In this way, in Jiang Hai's fishing grounds, a very simple food chain was formed. Jiang Hai felt that every time he saw these little guys, they would grow a little. It seems that the fish in his fish farm are really different from cows. Now, Jiang Hai just needs to wait and make money. In order to trap these fish, Edward Anderson will let Marin Rupert drive the A7802F plane that Jiang Hai bought every 2 days to dump fish food over the fish farm. These fish food are also specially made. Not only are there shrimp fished out, but there is also beef, cow offal, and the ranch in Jiang Hai's manor. These fish food are also very popular with these small fish, and eating meat naturally grows much faster than eating cuttlefish. Since Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy were recruited, the 3 major money-making institutions of Jiang Hai's manor have all been operating. The ranch, the fishery, and the winery have all begun to move in the direction of profitability. Although the effect of the fishery is good, Jiang Hai is still not sure when it will make money. However, the winery is very simple. According to Dulles Gerard, Jiang Hai planted a total of 4 kinds of grapes, the most of which is Cabernet Sauvignon. This is the world's most famous wine grape, so it is naturally the first choice. However, Cabernet Sauvignon alone can become the perfect red wine. According to the proportion, some other kinds of grapes must be added, among which are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. The other kind of grape is a kind of white grape, which is prepared to make ice wine and white wine. It is mainly supervised by O'Connor Murphy. This kind of white grape is called Chardonnay. Although they are all grapes, the way to take care of different grapes is naturally different. Fortunately, Jiang Hai has a lot of people here. As the weather gradually warmed up in March, the planting of vegetables was basically completed. The rest of the maintenance and watering were done by Mrs. Philemon and others. After the arrival of the two, Aphrodite and the others also officially became bartenders. At first, Dol Gerard and O'Connor Murphy were a little embarrassed to be commanding these 8 beautiful girls, although they were old enough to be the fathers and grandfathers of these girls. But after all, there's a difference between men and women. However, after seeing that these girls are unusually serious, they gradually became familiar with each other. But to be honest, men are very single-minded. No matter a woman's age, the people they like are different. But since men began to be interested in that, 90% of their fantasies are beauties between 18 and 25 years old. These girls naturally meet the requirements, although they are now masters. But even if they can only watch them work when they have nothing to do, after all, they are very happy to work with beautiful women. Jiang Hai doesn't know how to make wine. He doesn't know how to grow grapes. After all, he wasn't born in the countryside before. His limbs are not diligent, and he can't distinguish the 5 grains. Although it has been better in recent months, he is still the material to be an assistant when he has nothing to do. In addition to the main business of the manor, Jiang Hai's personal feelings are the same as before. There's no progress. Shtwini Clive still comes to teach Delina and Marion every 2 or 3 days, and sometimes brings Karma Cliff. But as the 3 become more and more familiar with each other, Jiang Hai and Sandy still don't have any sparks. In Karma's eyes, she is anxious in her heart, but Jiang Hai and Shtwini Clive seem to like it very much, so she doesn't need to say more. The United States is very lenient about the love of their children. Parents and parties are not anxious, so it is useless for her to be anxious. In this way, time flowed by unknowingly, almost without giving Jiang Hai time to react. The cars that Jiang Hai ordered were also delivered a while ago. The Nouveau Riche Gold Shield, the black and blue Rolls-Royce, and the black Ford E350 were placed in the parking lot of the house, and the whole atmosphere was different in an instant. Among these cars, Jiang Hai's favorite is naturally his Shield. This car should be driven by a man. Although it is smaller than his F650 and F750, its defense level is several times that of these 2 cars. $2 million for a car wasn't a joke. In recent days, the car he is most willing to drive is this one. Unknowingly, April in Boston quietly came, and the flower buds on the grassland also bloomed at this time. The climate in Boston, because of its location by the sea, is an oceanic climate. The coldest time is not too cold, and the hottest time is not too hot, but the precipitation is very high. It is easy to have storms in summer and blizzards in winter. In addition to these 2 points, it is still a very good place. In April, in Jiang Hai's impression, April in Ice City has just opened, and the weather is still very cold, but in Boston, people have changed out of thick winter clothes. Now, it is basically enough to wear a sweater when going out. Jiang Hai doesn't know about this kind of temperature, but he likes it now. In such a leisurely situation, Jiang Hai ushered in the most important event since he set up the manor. The New York Beef Show is about to begin. Since Jiang Hai bought this manor, he has 2 purposes. The first is to upgrade his tattoos. The second reason was to earn more money. Not to mention that Jiang Hai only had money in his eyes. There was no one in this world who didn't like money. If it wasn't for his lack of money, he wouldn't have failed in his marriage. Therefore, Jiang Hai was particularly interested in money. As for his beef cattle, to put it bluntly, even if he tied the wine and the fishery together, he would not be able to make as much money as beef cattle. Of course, if you count the fact that Jiang Hai could ignore the water pressure in the ocean and look for sunken ships, then the business opportunities in the sea would be greater. However, if you purely rely on business without this kind of night grass, there was no doubt that beef cattle would be a big business. The New York Beef Show is an exhibition that Jiang Hai is very interested in from the beginning. After a few months of breeding, his cattle have reached the standard to be sold, and this beef show is the best platform to display his manor's sales. The New York Beef Show is scheduled to be held on April 24th. At the beginning of April, Jiang Hai has already submitted his intention money online to rent a large exhibition hall. This exhibition hall alone cost Jiang Hai $1 million. However, considering the number of cows that he could sell in the future, 1 million was actually not a lot. One could not catch a wolf without sacrificing the child. Moreover, 1 million was not a lot compared to cows. As long as he could sell them, he was willing to spend 100 million. After paying his intention money and obtaining the right to participate in the exhibition, Jiang Hai's manor also started to move. On April 5th, they selected 15 cattle to be exhibited. On April 7th, they started to feed these cattle in captivity. On April 14th, they went to participate in the cattle inspection and obtained the right to participate in the exhibition. On April 21st, Jiang Hai's cattle were successfully loaded into the car. Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, Belle Lester, and Eleanor Cece, who came to help, drove Jiang Hai's Shield in an F-750. They rushed to New York City, which is not far from here. Chapter 229. The sun was shining on Boston's highway. Under the golden sun, a golden armored SUV was also rushing on the road at a very fast speed. Behind this car was a huge F-750. Behind the F-750, there was an extended flatbed. On the flatbed, there were 15 cows standing or lying down. It might also be because they ate too much grass nourished by Jiang Hai's aura, so these cows were not as timid as other cows. Even most of the cows were curiously looking at the roadside scenery at this time. Sometimes, when they stopped the car, they would nibble on the weeds on the roadside. Of course, most of them would just take a bite and stop eating. For them, they were used to the smell of the pasture in Jiang Hai's manor. They had no feeling for these ordinary grasses. Unless they were really hungry now, they would not eat these grasses. However, although these cows did not seem to be afraid, Robbins, the veteran cowboy, still felt that they should prioritize safety. Basically, after coming out of the manor and going to any rest stop on the highway, he would tell Jiang Hai to stop here and observe the cows. Then, he would feed the cows some grass and water to maintain their physical condition. Although it was slow, it was stable. After all, they were going to New York to participate in the competition. If the cows got sick on the road, it would be troublesome. They would have to pull the cows from the manor again, which would be a headache. However, this speed was indeed very slow. After walking for about a morning, Jiang Hai and the others had just arrived at the outskirts of Boston. It would take about 2 hours to drive from Boston to New York, but according to Jiang Hai's estimation, it would be good if they could reach New York before 8 o'clock in the evening. However, the only advantage was that the organizers had arranged a cow sheet. No matter how late they arrived, there would be someone to arrange it. At the same time, people like Jiang Hai, who had an exhibition hall, also had 5 rooms. The $1 million were not spent in vain. Naturally, food and accommodation were included. Although it was just a buffet and they would probably stay in an ordinary guest room, at least they didn't have to spend any effort looking for it. At the last rest stop before leaving Boston, Jiang Hai walked down with a purple teacup just as he parked the car. Ever since Jiang Hai became fond of drinking tea, this purple teacup would never leave his hand if he went out. After getting used to drinking tea, he would feel that the taste of other things was indeed a little worse when he drank other things. After parking the car and going to the bathroom, Jiang Hai came over. It was not the first time that Jiang Hai had seen such a thing. He knew that these people had nothing to do here. So, since he was here, he was going to Boston. He still had things to buy. So he said, "You guys eat here first. I will go to Boston." "Okay, boss. Just take care of the time. We can stay here for up to an hour." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins glanced at his watch. Originally, they were going to have lunch at the next place, but now that Jiang Hai said he was going to Boston, they could eat here. After all, Jiang Hai was the one who paid for it. "No need. I will go to Huaxia's store and be back in a while." After nodding to Robbins, Jiang Hai climbed back into his car. After putting down the teacup, he sped up and headed for the northern part of Boston. Indeed, from the highway, it only took about 10 minutes for Jiang Hai to arrive at his destination. Holding the teacup, Jiang Hai parked the car and jumped out of the car. As soon as he finished, he saw the old man who was sitting in front of the store at this time, waving a fan there. Needless to say, this is the store where Jiang Hai always comes to buy things. "Uncle, I'm resting here. Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile. However, just as Jiang Hai came over, the old man's eyes hadn't opened yet, but his nose moved first. Long Jing? Sitting up all of a sudden, the old man looked at Jiang Hai's teacup and asked with a puzzled look. Yeah, Long Jing, I brought it from China. It tastes good. Would you like to try it? Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He was still very confident in his tea. After all, it was so expensive. There's no need to try it. Judging by the smell, it is indeed produced in Westlake, but it is not a very good variety. Look at my tea. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but chuckle and picked up the small teapot next to him. As the small teapot was opened, a fragrance also went straight to Jiang Hai's nose. The bean fragrance is really refreshing. Well, it seems good. This smell is stronger than mine. Taking the old man's teapot, Jiang Hai smelled it. Indeed, the bean fragrance of this tea is stronger than his own, and looking at the leaves, they are more complete and beautiful than his own. This made Jiang Hai recognize at a glance that this tea should also be Long Jing. He doesn't know whether it is from Westlake, but at least the taste is better than his own. After taking a sip, Jiang Hai found that his aura, which was increasing all the time, seemed to be absorbed a little faster. This made Jiang Hai very sure that this tea must be better than his tea. Uncle, where did you get this tea? Returning the small teapot inside to the old man, Jiang Hai asked with some surprise. I planted it at home. Haha, when the domestic management was not too strict, I got a few tea trees, but the black tea trees all died. Only a few green tea trees survived. These years, they have grown well. The tea in this teapot is also Westlake Long Jing, but it is not watered with the water of Westlake, so it can only be regarded as Long Jing. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man said proudly, Then, sir, can you give me 2 stalks? Jiang Hai had the idea of getting tea trees from China a long time ago, but unfortunately, China is also not allowed to transplant living things through customs, at least with the current strength of Jiang Hai. He can't get these things. Just like hidden fragrance bead and black goat, these things are not allowed to be brought out of China. If he wants to bring them out, he can only bring made tea leaves. Even fresh tea sprouts are not allowed, which makes Jiang Hai very helpless. It's impossible to accommodate 2, but I can get you a few. Whether you can raise them or not depends on your luck. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man did not hesitate, but said directly, Jiang Hai usually likes to come here to buy things. Although Jiang Hai brought a lot of food when he came back, there will always be a time when the food will run out, and the food in the supermarket in the United States is not very complete. Anyway, there is nothing that Jiang Hai likes to eat, so he often comes to buy things, and the old man is also very familiar with him. As soon as the old man relented, Jiang Hai also said happily, Okay, thank you, uncle. Maybe for others, a few branches of tea leaves are difficult to raise, but Jiang Hai doesn't care. He can really plant willow trees casually. His aura is not for nothing, and the tea tree planted with aura, Jiang Hai feels that it will definitely give him a different return in the future. Kid, you didn't come back this time just to sell your tea leaves, right? It's noon. It's not like your style. After talking to Jiang Hai about the tea leaves, the old man picked up the teapot in front of him and took a sip and asked strangely, I'm going to participate in the beef cattle show in New York. The beef cattle are now being observed in the nearby rest station. I have nothing to do, so I came over and asked if you have any wine here. Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai said with a serious face, Wine? Isn't it inside? When he heard Jiang Hai say wine, the old man was stunned and pointed to the shelf in the supermarket. It's not the packaged wine. I want to ask if there is any brewed wine brewed with pure grain. Jiang Hai continued. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but look at him with some doubts. Generally speaking, this kind of brewed wine has a high alcohol content, and the taste is not very good. It is not that kind of high grade, and there is no good packaging. In China, this kind of wine is not easy to find, let alone abroad. Seeing that Jiang Hai actually wanted such a wine, the old man couldn't help but ask, Pure grain wine? This kind of wine is not easy to get here. What do you want this wine for? Didn't I tell you a while ago? I went into the mountains to hunt with a group of people. They all hunted adult male deer. After killing them, they took away the antlers, and the rest belongs to me. I also came here to buy spices for stewing venison. When he heard the old man's words, Jiang Hai also said. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the old man nodded. He did have some impression. Seeing that the old man remembered, Jiang Hai also continued. As he spoke, he observed the old man's expression. In addition to the venison, they also left me a dozen or so deer penis. Originally, I wanted to stew it, but when I thought of that thing, my heart felt a little uncomfortable and I couldn't eat it. So later, I thought about it, and I want to drink it with wine. Deer penis? Good stuff. Sure enough, when he heard about the deer penis, the old man's eyes suddenly lit up. Boy, I want to discuss something with you. I will help you get the wine, and I will also give you the tea, all free of charge. But that deer penis, you have to let me have 2, no 3. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man's eyes also flashed with a strange light. It seemed that he was very interested in this thing. And Jiang Hai saw that the old man really had a way to get pure grain wine. He couldn't help but be happy. Deal. 3 deer whips were nothing to Jiang Hai. If he wanted, he could go into the mountains to hunt for them. However, this wine made from pure grain was not so easy to get. Now, he was already thinking about what to put in it. The 2 foxes, one old and one young, looked at each other tacitly, and then smiled. Then Jiang Hai and the old man exchanged a few more words, then drove away, returned to the rest station, and continued to go to New York. Sure enough, as Jiang Hai thought, when they arrived at the New York venue, the lights were already on. Chapter 230. It's so late, it's really troublesome. Looking at the single sheet in front of him, Jiang Hai signed his name and said to the staff in front of him with a smile. He handed over a franklin as a tip. Hey, it's no trouble. You guys came early. There will be more people coming tonight. Seeing the green franklin, some of the staff members who were a little reluctant immediately smiled and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face. After a long day of travel, well, actually, it wasn't that far, mainly because the car was too slow, Jiang Hai and the others finally arrived at New York City around 8 o'clock. When they arrived at the bullpen and hotel provided by the organizers, it was almost 9 o'clock. Fortunately, because the organizers had considered that this time's beef cattle exhibition was very big, and these cattle couldn't be transported by plane, nor could they be transported by train. The train system in the United States wasn't very developed, so most of the cattle would be sent by car. Therefore, the organizers had already arranged for staff to arrange the bullpen for the participating cattle 24 hours a day. At the same time, they also arranged accommodation for the team staff. After Jiang Hai arrived, he found the staff who was still eating supper and called him over to arrange a place for his cattle. With a tip of $100, the staff, who was not very happy at first, was grinning from ear to ear. He arranged for Jiang Hai to have the best cow sheet in their company. Of course, Jiang Hai was not really naive to think that the bullpen he said was the best, so he specifically asked Robinsi to take a look. After Robinsi looked at the bullpen, he nodded to Jiang Hai, indicating that the bullpen here was indeed good. After registering their numbers, Jiang Hai and the others drove directly to the nearby hotel, leaving Robinsi here to watch. After all, such a public storage place was always a bit unsafe. Of course, they weren't afraid of wild beasts or anything like that, but they were afraid of people. If someone were to go crazy and come here, not to mention killing the cows, just feeding the cows something bad would be enough to make people depressed. The reason why Jiang Hai and the others came with 4 people was because of this reason. They need to take turns to keep watch at night. Basically, the 4 of them would keep watch for 2 hours each. Because the place where they lived was only about a 5-minute drive from here, it was more convenient. After making an appointment with Robinsi to watch the second shift, Jiang Hai followed everyone to the hotel arranged by the organizer. After entering the hotel, Jiang Hai showed the text message that he bought the booth and the number. The staff quickly verified the number and gave Jiang Hai and the others 5-room cards. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai and the others did not come with 5 people, but it didn't matter if there was an extra room. It was better to have more than one room. Just as Jiang Hai and the others took the room cards and were about to go upstairs to rest, the hotel's elevator also descended from upstairs. When the elevator door opened, Jiang Hai, who was walking in front, and the people who came out of the elevator were unconsciously stunned. What was called enemies on a narrow road? Jiang Hai really didn't understand it before. He thought that the world was so big, and there shouldn't be too many opportunities to meet his enemies. But now he found that the world was round, and he would meet his enemies sooner or later. At this time, a group of people appeared in front of him. It was none other than the people from Cartwright Company. Paul K., who made a bet with Jiang Hai last time, also came out of the elevator at this time, but obviously he was the central figure last time. This time, he was just a peripheral figure, standing in front of a young man and saying something. When the elevator door opened and Jiang Hai saw him, Paul also saw Jiang Hai, and his face couldn't help but change. Oh, what a coincidence! Does such a big company like yours also live here? Seeing Paul K's face change color, Jiang Hai didn't forget that he still had a bet with this guy. Although $1 million was nothing to Jiang Hai, especially the cattle in his manor, if he sold them all, it would be a terrifying number. But this didn't mean that Jiang Hai would let Paul K go. Jiang Hai had never been a broad-minded person. You, manager over here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Paul K's face turned ugly. If it was any other time, he would definitely mock Jiang Hai. But now he had more important things to do. As for the bet between him and Jiang Hai, he naturally knew about it, but he didn't think that his company would lose. Especially after his company developed that thing, he was confident that he would win this bet. Paul, you know him? But when he heard Jiang Hai's words, the young man walking in the middle stopped and looked at Jiang Hai curiously. He could hear the sarcasm in Jiang Hai's words, but he didn't seem to know this person. He's just a farm owner who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Hearing the young man's words, Paul K. also said with a smile, "This is the person who made the bet with Paul K." But if Paul K. didn't want to say it, someone else would. It was impossible for a large company to be united, especially when it came to sabotaging each other. They were very good at it. As soon as Paul K. finished speaking, a voice came from the side. "Oh, it's you. I've heard about this before. $1 million, that's not a small amount." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the young man chuckled. Although this matter was passed back to the company's board of directors was not very satisfied with Paul K's gamble, because it had some impact on the company's positive image. But now that they were united against the outside world, this young man would still stand firmly on his side. For me, 1 million is indeed just a small amount. I'm too lazy to bet on less. Hearing the young man's words, Jiang Hai also felt the hostility in his words and gently picked his ear. If you don't give Jiang Hai face, Jiang Hai naturally won't give you face. $1 million for the current Jiang Hai is a lot of money, but he can still afford it. Since you're so confident, do you want to raise the stakes? Seeing Jiang Hai's expression of I'm a rich man, the young man chuckled and said to Jiang Hai, "Okay, I don't care. How much?" Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a serious face, "Add another 4 million to make it a round number of 5 million. Seeing Jiang Hai's sloppy look, the young man's eyes couldn't help but narrow, and then a number came out of his mouth lightly. $5 million. Hearing his words, not only the people around him, but even the staff at the front desk in the distance gasped. They originally thought that these two groups were just renewing their friendship, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. These two groups had a grudge against each other. $5 million. More than 80% of the Americans might not be able to earn $5 million even if they work for a lifetime. These two people said it so casually. What did it mean to treat money as if it wasn't money? They had seen it firsthand. However, it was obvious that 5 million had not reached Jiang Hai's bottom line. He only smiled lightly, stretched out his right hand, raised his index finger, and said to the young man, "Let's add another 5 million. 10 million. That's called rounding it up." Hiss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, even the young man was stunned, let alone the people next to him. Originally, the girls at the front desk didn't have any thoughts about Jiang Hai's ordinary clothes. But as soon as these words came out of his mouth, the girls' eyes were like searchlights in the dark night. In an instant, they turned on their maximum power and scanned Jiang Hai's body. They really didn't expect that this guy who looked ordinary, had an ordinary figure, and was dressed in ordinary clothes was actually a super rich man. Since he casually made a bet of tens of millions, it meant that this guy's assets were in the hundreds of millions. He was such a young billionaire. Just thinking about it made them feel like their legs were clamped together even tighter. While these girls were infatuated, the young man's eyes narrowed. $10 million was a huge bet for a rich man in the United States. This young man wasn't a good person to begin with. He was the young owner of the Carlet Livestock Company. The Carlet Livestock Company was a joint stock company. Because of its reputation in the eastern part of the United States, the company's total assets were $17 billion, of which the Carlet family owned 53% of the shares. And this young man was the current patriarch of the Carlet family, the eldest son. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken over the position of general manager of the company. However, although he was the first heir of the family, don't forget that the entire family's assets added up to only $1 billion, and his pocket money definitely didn't have $10 million. If he made this bet, he would no longer be representing himself, but the company, because this money would definitely be paid by the company. How do I know if you have $10 million? What if you're trying to get something for nothing? Looking at Jiang Hai, the young man stopped at his tracks. He originally thought that he and Jiang Hai were not on the same level. After all, he was the heir of a company and a family, while Jiang Hai was just a manor owner. However, if Jiang Hai was a manor owner who could take out $10 million in cash at any time, that would be different. When he said this, he actually didn't want to make this bet anymore. He needed to find a way out. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai knew everything, but he wouldn't give face to those who were destined to be his enemies. There should be more than 15 million in this card. There's a computer here to check. Jiang Hai said calmly as he casually threw the Centurion black gold card in his wallet onto the counter in the distance. Chapter 231. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the girls at the counter immediately picked up their black gold cards and checked them online. When the computer screen displayed a number similar to what Jiang Hai had said, the girls' eyes lit up as they looked at Jiang Hai. It seemed that he was a very low-key tycoon. "You're very confident." Narrowing his eyes, the young man looked at Jiang Hai, who had put him in an awkward position. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. Speaking of which, he wasn't a brainless idiot. Otherwise, he would have been swallowed whole by his family. The reason why he had stood up for his employee just now was naturally because this person was his employee. That was how people were. If you hit someone, you could only say that the other person deserved it. But if you were hit, you had to pursue so-called fairness. To be precise, Jiang Hai was the same kind of person. So, how could this guy run away after putting on show? How could he let that happen? Of course I'm confident. I've always been that confident. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and said, "Let's go." Narrowing his eyes, the man was considering whether or not his bet with Jiang Hai would work. 10 million was very tempting, but he had to have the ability to spend it. He didn't know why Jiang Hai was so confident in his bull, but he was a businessman, not a gambler. Perhaps if he was in the IT industry or a venture capital company, he would have chosen to bet with Jiang Hai. But his company was a livestock company. The biggest risk he took every year was to bet on the price of this year's forage. That was all. His company's profits were small, and safety was the priority. If he really lost this 10 million bet, not only would he lose his position as general manager, but he would also suffer a huge blow to his family's inheritance rights. And if he won, he would only win the $10 million. Although the green dollar was tempting, it wasn't enough for him to make such a fatal mistake. So, after glancing at Jiang Hai, he turned around and spoke directly to the people next to him. "Hey, you're leaving already? Otherwise, we'll do as you say. 5 million is fine too." Looking at the backs of these people leaving, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shout loudly. Although these people didn't know what Jiang Hai was thinking, since he dared to shout like that, the young man had to be careful. Looking at the people leaving quickly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. Seeing Jiang Hai smile, Bell Lester walked over and said with a chuckle, "He didn't take the bait, boss." In fact, it wasn't just Jiang Hai who was very confident in their cows. Everyone else was also quite confident in their cows. After all, those cows were personally raised by them, and there were also newbies who had killed them. The probability of special grade A frost beef appearing was as high as 100%. This winter, they had killed a lot of cows, all of which were relatively thin and weak. There was not a single cow that did not have special grade A beef. It was just that the percentage of meat produced was somewhat different. And this type of beef had always been a super killer in the beef industry. The reason why Japanese Wagyu were so amazing and could enjoy such a life was that these bulls who enjoyed such a life had a high probability of producing this type of beef. But even if the probability was high, it wasn't 100%. But Jiang Hai had a 100% success rate. As long as nothing happened to his bull this time, his manor and his beef would definitely become a hit. You can't treat everyone as fools. Let's go back to sleep. Jiang Hai was a little surprised that this person wasn't dizzy with the $10 million. Didn't they say that the protagonist had a halo that lowered his IQ? Even if the protagonist's IQ was low, the opponent's IQ would definitely be lower than the protagonist's. But recently, Jiang Hai found that his opponent's IQ didn't seem to be lower than his. In the whole world, his physical fitness was absolutely top, but the problem with his IQ was at least he didn't think that he was very smart. Shrugging his shoulders with Bell, Jiang Hai walked into the elevator first. When the elevator reached their floor, he gave each of them a key and walked into their respective rooms. Because Jiang Hai only brought 4 people with him this time, there were 5 rooms. Not only was there an empty room, but if this room was also a standard room with 2 beds, then it would be a waste. So Jiang Hai asked for a room with 1 big bed. It was good that each person had a room. Walking into his room, Jiang Hai first took a shower and then had a good rest. After driving for a day, although he rested from time to time at the rest station, he still felt a little tired. Not physically, but mentally. Soaking in a hot bath was much more comfortable. After taking a shower, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa and watched TV. After waiting for almost 2 hours, he drove the F-750 to change with Robbins. He didn't want his shield baby to be controlled by other men. His novelty hadn't passed yet. Resting in the cowshed was naturally different from resting in the hotel. Not only was there a cold wind blowing, but there was also a smell of cow dung. There were people in each cowshed, but these people hardly talked because they needed to focus more on their own cows. Jiang Hai also lay on the chair and played with his phone for 2 hours. Bell came to change with him. After returning to the hotel, he had a good sleep. The next morning, Jiang Hai, Robbins, and Bell, who had just returned, went to the cowshed together. Bell and Eleanor Cece were left to guard the cows, while Jiang Hai and Robbins went to the venue. There were a lot of things they needed to confirm here, such as their booth, the security of their booth, the promotional materials, and the protection of the iron fence. If there were any problems, they could immediately ask the organizer for help. Fortunately, the organizers received a lot of money this time and prepared everything very well. The $1 million booth really did have the effect of $1 million because Jiang Hai didn't have that many cows in the exhibition, only 15 of them. So the place wasn't very big, but the location was the best. After entering the exhibition hall, it was the first third of the street facing the front. There were no private cowsheds next to him. They were all owned by livestock companies. The Cartwright Company, which had a grudge against Jiang Hai, was behind him, but it took up a lot more space than Jiang Hai. While Jiang Hai and Robbins were checking the facilities here, the people from the Cartwright Company also came to check. When they saw Jiang Hai, the young leader couldn't help but chuckle. Although he didn't dare to accept Jiang Hai's $10 million bet, it didn't stop him from looking down on Jiang Hai. A small private manor dared to challenge a big company like his. He had already decided that this time, Jiang Hai wouldn't be able to sell a single cow. His subordinates naturally knew what he was thinking. So before they came, they specifically explained to the 2 companies beside Jiang Hai. Although one of the 2 companies was in the central and the other in the west, They weren't smaller than the Cartwright Company. But after all, they were in the East, and this was the Cartwright Company's territory. As the saying goes, a strong dragon can't suppress a snake in its old haunts. Besides, they were just giving face and didn't need to do anything. So, Jiang Hai and the others seemed to be isolated. Jiang Hai was busy here for a long time. Other than the staff who came to deliver water and ask if there was anything he needed, no one from the two companies spoke to Jiang Hai again. For others, this kind of atmosphere was a little depressing, but for Jiang Hai, it didn't matter. Because he didn't plan to talk to others, it was actually good for everyone to do their own things. After a busy day, Jiang Hai specially ordered a table full of dishes at the hotel where they were staying. This could also be considered as giving his brothers some encouragement in advance. These past few days, Robbins, Belle, and Eleanor Cece, who came to help, were all very tired. Eating a good meal could also warm their hearts a little. On the 21st, the cows were sent to the exhibition area. On the 22nd, the equipment in the exhibition area was inspected. On the 23rd, the cows were released for testing. At 8 o'clock in the morning on the 24th, the new New York American Eastern Beef Cattle Exhibition officially opened. Although it was not like any other exhibition in China, where there were lanterns, streamers, and firecrackers, since the morning of the 24th, there was a traffic jam on the road near the exhibition hall. Cars drove into the parking lot of the exhibition hall from the intersection. After all, it was a large-scale livestock exhibition, so it couldn't be held in New York City. Although New York City was in the name of New York, it was actually in the suburbs. Not far from New Jersey was New York. However, although it was in a remote place, it didn't stop the enthusiasm of others. Buyers from large Western restaurants, large hotels, large supermarkets, and even small supermarkets all came. All of a sudden, the originally deserted exhibition became crowded with people and carriages. In the sea of people, Jiang Hai and the others sat in front of their own exhibition hall. Looking at the huge flow of people in front of them and the performance of the other shops, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. He suddenly felt that he was a little too naive. Originally, he thought that the beef cattle exhibition was probably similar to the domestic agricultural products exhibition and recommendation. It was just putting things there, and interested people would come and ask and take a look. That was all. In the winter, he also went to the beef cattle exhibition in Massachusetts, and it was basically similar. But it turned out that he thought too little. At this time, the companies in front of him were not beef cattle exhibitions, but game exhibitions. Chapter 232. Welcome to the Prussian Cattle Company. Our company's beef cattle are all raised in Montana. They drink mountain spring water and eat fresh grass. Their meat is delicious, well-proportioned, and delicate. Please come to our Charles Livestock Company. Our cattle farms are all over the world. We have cattle farms in Asia, Europe, and America. Our beef here is top-notch, and the probability of marbling is very high. Welcome to our Kawasaki Livestock Company. Come to our Suzuki Livestock Company. With the flow of people, many companies officially started marketing their beef fairs. In this era, advertising had always been very important. The sales volume of a product was directly proportional to the packaging and publicity. It was precisely because of this that the production value of the product was not the biggest part of the output of the big companies. The real cost was the cost of publicity. For example, if a movie had a total budget of 100 million yuan, 30 million yuan would be used to pay the actors, 20 million yuan would be used to shoot the movie, and 50 million yuan would be used to promote the movie. Although livestock companies did not burn as much money as movie promotions, they still spent a lot of money. Originally, when Jiang Hai went to see the beef fairs in Massachusetts, he did not feel anything. But now it was completely different. With the flow of people entering this area, the major companies also launched different activities. Basically, there were three major activities: balloons, banners, and beautiful women. These were the essential elements. At the same time, some of the larger companies would hang a lot of TVs there. They introduced their farms, their companies, their cattle farming, and their business philosophy in all aspects. There are also some developers who specially looked for gaming companies to make some simple games. Not only could they use the app to play it on their mobile phones, but they could also queue up to play it on their Xbox. It was a simulation of how they grew up as a calf. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was not these patterns, but the row of plainly dressed beauties standing at the entrance of almost all the exhibition halls. These beauties basically only wore clothes that could cover the important parts of their bodies. On their heads, they either wore a pair of horns or a cowboy hat. They were dressed in Western cowboy style, cute little cow style, and cute pink style. There were all kinds of beautiful women. There were European, American, Latin American, and Asian beauties. Although it was April in New York and it wasn't time for them to wear this outfit, they still worked hard for their jobs. These girls were either dancing on the booths, handing out flyers to the tourists below, or doing some specific actions in some corners to attract the tourists to their shops. Look at them. Is this what you call an exhibition? Luo Binsi, what do we mean by this? Looking at the girls in front of him, Zhang Hai's eyes never left their long legs and ample bosoms. His eyes were not idle, and his mouth was not idle either. He couldn't help but say to Robbins, this guy was too unreliable, and he actually felt a little embarrassed. Compared to the other booths, Zhang Hai's booth was a little... Haha. The location of Zhang Hai's booth was very good. After all, there were only 15 cows in the exhibition hall, and it cost $1 million for 3 days. This location was not the best in this exhibition, but it could be ranked in the top 5. This proved that Zhang Hai was not short of money. But to be honest, even the booths that only cost $100,000 were much more lively than Zhang Hai's booth. At Zhang Hai's place, there were no beautiful women, no banners, no TV, and no advertising. Not to mention, there were no games. There were only 4 men sitting at the entrance, and behind them were 15 cows looking around in a daze. Boss, I don't think we need those fancy things. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Robbins was a little embarrassed. It was not that he didn't think of it, nor was it that he wanted to save money for Zhang Hai. It was because he really didn't have the experience. In the past, he had participated in the New York exhibition, but that was nearly 10 years ago. At that time, people didn't have so many tricks. Most importantly, he was the person in charge of the cattle. The number of cattle that could be placed in the exhibition hall was about 20 to 30, but there were hundreds of cattle that were transported to the exhibition hall. The rest of the cows naturally needed someone to look after them. Robbins, the head cowboy, was the one who looked after the cows in the barn. So, at most, he had heard about the situation here, but he had never been here. As for Bell Lester, well, you couldn't count on him to be here, right? After all, he was still a newbie. Without advertising and TV, it was difficult to keep the eyes and footsteps of the people around him. Some people were interested in Zhang Hai's exhibition hall. They poked their heads in to take a look, then walked out. Because Zhang Hai didn't even have someone to introduce him to. As the boss, Zhang Hai naturally couldn't introduce him. Besides, he didn't know how to do it. Cece was a fisherman, so he didn't know how to do it. Bell was good with guns, but he couldn't talk. Robbins knew these cows the best, but according to Zhang Hai's understanding of this guy, if he wanted to ask for a job, he had to eat for a long time. He even had to treat Zhang Hai to a meal before he dared to test him. It would be strange if this guy would introduce him. So, even if there were occasionally people who came, they would just take a look outside and leave. These people were basically employees of small supermarkets or non-chain restaurants. They didn't have the eyesight to see the quality of these unslaughtered cows. Looking at the deserted Zhang Hai, the group of people from the Cartwright Company couldn't help but laugh. Pathetic nouveau riche, country bumpkin. Especially the guy who was forced by Zhang Hai to bet 10 million, but in the end, he couldn't help but sneer. Even Paul K., who was behind him, who made the 1 million bet with Zhang Hai, couldn't help but wipe his sweat. It seemed that Zhang Hai was just pretending to be tough. With his pathetic popularity, he wanted to win against them? Nonsense. Now, Zhang Hai's perception was much stronger than before. He naturally saw through these people's gazes, but he didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. If you asked him to pull down his face to attract customers, he would really be too lazy to do so. However, he was still a little reluctant to watch his $1 million go down the drain. It was really depressing. Oh, your place is really deserted. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about whether he should go out to find the girl to come back and make the announcement, suddenly a voice came in from the door. Jiang Hai looked up. Oh, an acquaintance. It was the old man from the supermarket in Boston. With him, there was also the middle-aged man who had met Jiang Hai once. Beside him was a woman who looked to be in her 40s, and behind them was a girl who looked a little timid. Hey, uncle, why are you here? Looking at the old man, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say happily, our family also runs a supermarket. Why can't I come? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man was not polite. He walked straight into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall and found a seat to sit down. Seeing that his father had come, the family of 3 behind him, who didn't seem to want to come in, had to come in. Robin still had some eyesight and immediately brought chairs for them to sit down. You didn't say that you wanted to come, so let's come together. Seeing the old man sitting opposite him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say, you didn't ask, haha. I have to say your place is really deserted. Smiling at Jiang Hai, the old man couldn't help but say. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly. I'm here for the first time, so I don't know. My cowboys don't have these tricks up their sleeves. Hey, it looks like there won't be any improvement today. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile and mutter. You really have too much money and nowhere to spend it. The location of your exhibition hall is very good. It costs about $1 million. You didn't even do your homework before coming here. Don't tell me you don't even know what to do in these 3 days. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man asked with some surprise. I know this. Although Jiang Hai didn't prepare any publicity, at least he still looked at the process of the exhibition. This Eastern beef cattle exhibition was mainly for 3 days. In these 3 days, in addition to promoting their beef cattle, dairy cows, and agricultural products, there would also be a selection, the selection of the Beef King. On the first day of the exhibition, it was mainly tourists who came here to visit or purchasers who came here to look and then vote. Each exhibition hall had 15 numbers, 1 number corresponding to a cow. Otherwise, why do you think Jiang Hai brought 15 cows? These cows had their own numbers in the central system of the main control room. If the tourists felt that a cow was better, they would vote for that cow. Each person was limited to 1 vote. At the end of the day, the 16 cows with the highest number of votes would enter this year's Eastern Beef King semifinals. On the second day, it was the PK battle. From the appearance, to the color of the hair, to the body shape, that was to say, judging whether a cow was good or not. 8 out of the 16 cows would enter the finals on the third day. The finals were much more serious, because these 8 cows would be slaughtered on the spot. After all, this was a beef cattle exhibition, not some horsemanship or dog show. The beef cattle here not only had to have a beautiful body shape, but also had to have good meat. The amount of meat produced, the amount of meat, and the probability of marbling appeared were all the criteria for judging. However, even if they won the Beef King, it would be the honor of the cow's owner because the cow was already dead. Chapter 233. The quality of your cattle is good, but if you don't have popularity, you can't even pass the first round. How can you be the king of cattle? Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man said with a smile on his face. Looking at his wretched smile, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Then what should I do now? Although when Jiang Hai came here, he had some understanding of the rules here, but his understanding wasn't very clear. He originally thought that all the cows would be taken out for the exhibition, and then the audience and tourists would be able to score them. Now it seems that he was thinking too much. If he can't even qualify for the first day of the competition, then what's the point of the rest? Although it wasn't that Jiang Hai couldn't afford to lose $1 million, it would be too embarrassing. What else can we do? But boy, I have to say that the quality of your cattle is really good. How much are you selling your cattle for? Hearing Jiang Hai's speechless words, the old man couldn't help but smile and say. Jiang Hai was speechless. Of course it's good cattle. It's not that I want to say this, but every cow I have here can be butchered in a marbled meat. The other meat is also specially selected. The tender meat of my cattle is not worse than the eye meat and the upper brain of the average cattle. Speaking of his cattle, Jiang Hai was still very confident and looked at the old man with a serious face and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man couldn't help but be stunned. As for the old man's son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter, they were a little confused when they heard Jiang Hai's words. If you don't brag, we will still be good friends. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man said with a serious face, What are you bragging about? You don't believe me. No matter what, my cattle will be butchered in 3 days. You will know then. Looking at the old man in front of him who didn't believe him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little speechless. Hey, if your cattle are like what you said, then your cattle are all treasures. According to the calculation that a cow can be butchered into 5% of the best grade A beef, then your cattle here are worth 100,000. 15 cows, that's more than one. 5 million. TSK, that's right. If you didn't have such confidence, you wouldn't have spent more than $1 million to rent this place. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man here was a little convinced. Although he didn't spend much time with Jiang Hai, he still has some understanding. But he still had some understanding of Jiang Hai's character. At least, he wasn't likely to run his mouth. If what Jiang Hai said was true, then Jiang Hai's net worth was unimaginable. This was because he knew that Jiang Hai didn't only have 15 cows, he had nearly 20,000 of them. If a cow is worth $100,000, 20,000 cows is $2 billion, which is comparable to the total assets of a medium-sized company. This is only the amount for 1 year. What if it's 10 years, 20 years? 2 billion will become 20 billion, and then 40 billion. It seems that if this snowball continues, then it's only a matter of time before Jiang Hai becomes the richest man in the world. It's good that you believe me. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai's eyes were brimming with tears. In fact, if someone pointed at a cow and told Jiang Hai that his cow was worth nearly $700,000, Jiang Hai would spit on his face and say that he's crazy about money. But when it comes to Jiang Hai, he really doesn't know what to say. I'll do my part. Which one of these cows do you think is the best? Seeing Jiang Hai's helpless look, the old man said with a serious face, and then pointed at the cows behind him. That's up to you. These cows were randomly picked from my manor. There's no obvious difference. At most, they were raised separately for about a week. Basically, they're all the same. I feel that every one of them has the potential to be the champion. Indeed, Jiang Hai's words were not groundless. His cows are all very good-looking. Their bones are strong, their hair is soft and beautiful, and their eyes are bright. They look very intelligent. There's almost no fat on their bodies. The whole cow is not only intelligent, but also very strong and sturdy. If they were taken to other places, they would be raised as seeds. But in Jiang Hai's manor, they're almost exactly the same. This is not good news, because people rarely remember the things of the previous family and compare them with the things of this family. They would compare horizontally. In their eyes, Jiang Hai's cows are all the same, which means that Jiang Hai's cows are all the same. After the old man glanced at Jiang Hai's cows, he secretly nodded. Although he is not an expert, he is half an expert. Then I'll choose this one. This one looks more energetic. In the end, the old man chose Jiang Hai's third cow. The first person to enter the venue will have the right to vote. Immediately, the old man's son took out the app and entered their choice according to the number on the ballot. Soon, Jiang Hai's cow went from 0 votes to 4 votes. Jiang Hai also took a look at it, but it's better not to look at it, because at this time, the first cow has more than 2,000 votes. It's from Suzuki Dewey Livestock Company. Sigh, the gap is really big, but I have to thank you, old man. If it weren't for you, I might not even have 4 votes. Looking at the numbers in front of him, Jiang Hai sighed. Currently, the #1 company on the web is the Suzuki Daiwa Livestock Company of Japan. Although the United States has a strong sense of national pride and xenophobia, but he has to admit that Japan's Wagyu is the #1 cow in the beef industry. As the emperor of the beef industry, Japan's Wagyu has always stood at the top of the beef industry. In the past, the United States used to exert pressure on Japan through the government. However, in the face of pressure from their godfather, the United States, at that time, Japan firmly rejected these people. As the only beef cow in the world that had a 100% chance of producing marble veins, Wagyu was a 5A level existence. It had always been the strongest existence. Therefore, even if it was a beef show held in the United States, as long as a large Japanese livestock company came, it would definitely be able to enter the top 3. This was the position of Wagyu in the hearts of the people of the United States, and also in the hearts of the people of the world. Just like now, the first place is Wagyu, followed by Zhanghai's old rival, Carlite Company. The third place is a livestock company called Durif Company, which got more than 300 votes. The second and third place votes added together are not as many as the first place votes. This also shows the strength of Japan's beef. Of course, if it's according to the national nature, then Japan's Wagyu is far behind. You have to pay attention to this Suzuki Company. This is the third time they have participated in the New York Beef Show in the past 10 years. Before this, they won the title of King of Beef. Their company is not a small company in Japan. The probability of their beef having marble veins is also quite high. It's not easy to beat them. Looking at Zhanghai's phone, the old man smiled and patted Zhanghai's shoulder. He said with a serious expression, "Thank you, old man. This time, I will give you some beef." Hearing the old man's words, Zhanghai also reacted. Originally, he thought that as long as he has marble veins, he should be able to kill these beef cattle in seconds. But now it seems that there are still some strong enemies. It seems that the marble veins are not foolproof. You may have to work harder. Give it to me, but if you can sell it to me, that would be great. Hearing Zhanghai's words, the old man said with a smile, but hearing his words, Zhanghai was a little confused. What do you want beef for? In Zhanghai's view, the old man only has a small supermarket. If he wants to eat, he could just give him some. What does he want these for? At first, it was to sell, but I didn't expect that the boss of the Sea Commerce Group would also come to the beef show in person. Just when Zhanghai was puzzled, at this time, a woman's voice came from a distance. In the eyes of Zhanghai and the others, a very arrogant woman walked in from outside. This woman's face was very delicate. She looked about 30 years old. She was wearing a black striped woman's suit, a pair of high heels on her feet, and her long blonde hair was tied up high behind her head. Behind her, there were more than a dozen people, but some of them were recording something, and some of them were bodyguards, wearing sunglasses and standing beside her expressionlessly. When Zhanghai saw this person, he was stunned for a moment because he seemed to have seen this person before. But at that time, this person seemed to be wearing an evening dress, and her aura was very similar to now, but also completely different. On the other hand, Zhanghai was wearing an outdoor sportswear at that time, and now, he was also wearing outdoor sportswear. But what does this woman mean at this time? What the hell is that Sea Commerce supermarket? Mr. Zhang, I don't know if you still recognize me. Looking at the old man who turned around, the woman said slowly, "Prawalton, how can I not recognize you? How is your father?" Hearing this woman's words, the old man said with a smile. At this time, the smile on his face was almost the same as when he was talking to Zhanghai, but if you look carefully, you will find that the aura on his body at this time is completely different from before. "My father is fine. Thank you for your concern." This woman, named Prawalton, in front of the old man, did not retreat because of the aura. Instead, she opened her mouth and said to the old man in Huaxia language, which was not very proficient. Listening to this foreign woman, Zhanghai couldn't help but laugh, but he didn't say anything. This woman is really funny. In the past, it was very interesting to hear foreigners speak Chinese, and now it seems to be true. But compared to Zhanghai, some people around him were not surprised. Even the middle-aged man next to the old man nodded. Chapter 234. Hearing the woman's words, the old man chuckled and waved his hand indifferently. "Well, I have seen everything here. Then I will go first. This is my business card. Remember that you promised me that you would sell me beef afterward. Also, I have already taken care of the food and wine. Don't forget what I want." Patting Zhanghai on the shoulder, The old man walked away with a smile. After the old man left, Jiang Hai also looked at the business card the old man gave him for the first time. He only saw a name and a string of phone number printed on it. The name is Zhang Di Hai. The phone number is not the phone number in the store he is familiar with, but a private phone number. Before Jiang Hai could react, the old man had already left. As for the woman, she came in with her people. I didn't expect that we would meet again. I remember that I gave you my phone number, but why didn't you call me? Walking into the room, the woman named Walton raised her head and said proudly, "Oh, I thought you were just being polite at that time. I didn't think that you would really buy beef." Looking at Walton in front of him, Jiang Hai also put away the business card given by old Zhang. "You really don't know me?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman who was still a queen was slightly surprised. Should I know you?" Seeing this person's appearance, Jiang Hai asked carefully. He really didn't know her. In fact, not only did Jiang Hai not know her, but the three people around him also didn't know her, otherwise they would have reminded Jiang Hai. "Interesting. Whether you use such a trick to let me know you again, I have to admit that you succeeded. Your acting skills are really good. Then I will introduce myself again. My name is Walton, and I am now the general manager of Sam's Club." Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton said with a serious face, "Oh, hello, Ms. Walton." However, listening to her introduction, Jiang Hai was still very confused. He didn't know what Sam's Club was. Why did he feel that this guy was so proud when he talked about it? He had never heard of it before. Well, let's talk business. Although you don't know me, I find that your bulls are quite interesting." Walking into Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, Walton said, while walking. It seemed that Jiang Hai didn't know her, which really made her feel a little awkward. She hadn't felt this way for many years. Basically, wherever she went in the past, she was the most popular and sought-after person. People like Jiang Hai were really rare. My bulls here are not bragging. The quality is definitely the best here, and I can guarantee that each of them can be killed with the most beautiful marble grain. The total output of premium-grade A-Snow Frost beef will not be less than 5%, and the bulls here are not specially selected. The bulls in my manor are basically like this. Hearing Walton change the topic to bulls, Jiang Hai also said with a serious face. He was really confident in his bulls. It can be seen that these red flowers here don't have green leaves to go with them. They are indeed a little monotonous. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, others may not believe it, but Walton seemed to believe it. It's my first time participating, so I don't have much experience." Listening to Walton's words, Jiang Hai explained again awkwardly. "Your place is really interesting. We can also help you, but I hope that you can sell your beef to us." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Walton looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and said, "This is no problem. I also came here to sell these beef cattle." Hearing that she also intended to buy beef, Jiang Hai was not as surprised as he was to Mr. Zhang, because this woman looked at the ostentation. She shouldn't be buying it to eat. Jiang Hai also came here to do business. It is naturally excellent to be able to open a market. We want all the sales rights. But hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman turned her head and said with a serious face, "This may not work, because I have already promised Mr. Zhang. If he wants to buy, I will definitely let him buy enough." Shaking his head, Jiang Hai rejected Walton's proposal. The reason why he said this was because he really promised Mr. Zhang, and also because he can't put all his eggs in 3 baskets. This is not his style. "Interesting little boy, this is my business card. Remember what you promised me." Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Walton couldn't help but smile. Then she handed Jiang Hai a business card. This business card was almost the same as Mr. Zhang's. A whiteboard business card with only a string of English name, Walton, and a line of phone number below. After giving Jiang Hai her business card, the woman waved her hand to the people around her. Then she cast her vote on the cow that old Zhang and the others had voted for. In an instant, Jiang Hai's votes had almost reached 20. The ranking also went from the original nowhere to the top 300 in an instant. Although it is a qualitative leap, the top 300, what's the use? Thank you. Although these votes are just a drop in the bucket, Jiang Hai still nodded seriously. Although your cow is good, if it continues like this, It will be difficult for you to enter the semi-finals by the end of today, so you have to think of a way. Seeing Jiang Hai thanking her, Prawalton, who had already walked to the door, stopped and said to Jiang Hai without looking back, "But it's too late for me to find someone to make those things now." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Buying some TVs is easy. Buying some Xbox is also easy, but the problem is that he doesn't have an app now, and he doesn't shoot videos. These all take time. It also takes time to make those banners and balloons. It may not take much time to find those girls, but don't forget, their clothes are also custom-made. This also takes time. These big companies may have been preparing for a few months before the exhibition began. Now they want Jiang Hai to make a last-minute effort. Is this a joke? Therefore, other than feeling depressed, he had nothing else to say. Doing these conventional things, I guess you have no chance to win the competition, but recently Selena Gomez happened to be in New York. She is creating new music for her band with DJ Zed. If you want to turn the tables, maybe you can go to her. Looking at Jiang Hai's helpless face behind her, Prawalton said indifferently, but I'm not familiar with her." Thinking about it carefully, to be honest, Jiang Hai has almost forgotten what Selena Gomez looks like. He only remembers that the girl's height is neither tall nor short. In the eyes of the United States, she is indeed not tall. He can't remember what she looks like. He vaguely remembers that she has a square face. A square face. It always feels weird to say that a girl has a square face. Other than that, Jiang Hai really doesn't have any impression. You're not familiar with her. Will she introduce you to me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton asked with some surprise. I'm really not familiar with her." Jiang Hai recalled that the reason why the girl introduced him to this woman at the cocktail party that day seemed to be because of his relationship with Justin Bieber. He really doesn't know anything else. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but whisper, "You are really a strange person." Then she turned and left. For her, a person who owns a manor and sells cattle seems to have a lot of money, but he doesn't know her. He made friends with Selena Gomez, but he doesn't seem to know her. He didn't even call her, but he seems to have a close relationship with Zhang Hai of the Sea Commerce Group. Jiang Hai is now a big question mark in Prawalton's eyes. Am I strange? After watching Prawalton leave, Jiang Hai also turned his head and looked at Robbins and asked, Sometimes it's a bit." After thinking about it, Robbins nodded in agreement, and then the three of them couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He is such a casual person. He is weak in ambition. He is the kind of person who will never sit if he can lie down. He will never stand if he can sit. It is also a burden for him to think too much. "Boss, the quality of the beef cattle in this exhibition hall is surprisingly good. Although I don't know if it is true that all the beef cattle in his manor have marbled patterns, the probability of the beef here having marbled patterns is very high. It is at least A4 level or above." Regardless of Jiang Hai and others in the exhibition hall, after Prawalton walked out of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, a middle-aged man beside her walked to her side and whispered. This middle-aged man is the chief appraiser of Sam's Club. His vision is even sharper than the judges of this competition. For Jiang Hai's cattle, he believes that he will never be wrong. He doesn't know if all the cattle in Jiang Hai's manor have such quality, but at least his 15 cattle are of the best quality. I know, so I want to let him enter the finals. I want to see how good the quality of his beef cattle is. Squinting her eyes and listening to the analysis of her subordinates, Prawalton's face couldn't help but have a smile. She took the phone from her assistant's hand and dialed a familiar number. "Hello, Sister Prawalton, what's the matter?" The phone rang for about a dozen times before a woman hurriedly picked it up and shouted at the other side of the phone. On the other side of the phone, there was loud music that was constantly reverberating. This kind of sound was most likely to come from a nightclub. However, it was still morning and there were no nightclubs open yet. "Hello, sister, there's a fun thing. Maybe you'll be interested in it." Hearing the voice on the phone, Prawalton also said lightly, but when she said it, her eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. Chapter 235. Boss, The first place winner has more than 5,000 votes, and the 16th place winner has 327 votes. Sitting in the middle of the exhibition hall, Bell Lester looked at his phone helplessly and said speechlessly, "Boss, it looks like we're going to lose." Eleanor Cece couldn't help but whisper. While whispering, she also looked at Jiang Hai and Robbins. Jiang Hai was fine at this time, but Robin's face was a little ugly. After all, this beef show was their first shot at the farm's beef cattle. If this shot didn't work, it would have a huge impact on their future sales. As the leader of the farm's cowboys, he thought that this was his responsibility. If it's not meant to be, don't force it. You won't understand even if I tell you. This is fate. You have to accept it. Well, it's almost noon. What do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you. Jiang Hai was actually a little depressed at this time. In the blink of an eye, a few hours had passed. In addition to Mr. Zhang's family, Prawalton, and her dozen men who voted for nearly 20 votes, only some passers-by came in recently to vote. At present, Jiang Hai's cow had the most votes, only 31 votes, ranking 293rd. In addition to this cow, only 3 other cows had votes. They were 3 votes, 2 votes, and 2 votes. There were 11 cows that didn't even have votes. Jiang Hai was also very speechless. He wasn't distressed about renting this place for $1 million, nor was he distressed about losing $1 million. Although $2 million wasn't a small sum, it wasn't something Jiang Hai couldn't afford right now. However, if he lost it for no reason, he wouldn't be happy either. But what did he do now? He couldn't forcibly pull these people into his exhibition hall. Even if he pulled them in, they might not vote. It was too late to do anything else now. Of course, he knew that he couldn't just rely on him like this, but he did think of a lot of ways. Even if he directly killed a cow here to attract people's attention, that would be enough. But the problem now was that he couldn't kill a cow here. Killing a cow in the United States was also something to be careful about. Otherwise, the Animal Protection Association would come looking for trouble. Jiang Hai didn't want to be accused of killing animals on the street. Even in the finals, the cows were killed in a special slaughterhouse in the venue. The whole process was supervised by the staff in the exhibition hall and the venue staff to prevent any possibility of fake meat. Then, the dead cows were transported, skinned, and bled to the front to be dissected. This was also for the sake of fairness, justice, and publicity. However, from the looks of it, Jiang Hai had no chance to participate in the finals. At least for now, he couldn't even enter the next stage. It was good to be awesome, but first, there was no comparison, and second, there was no publicity. After all, there were very few experts here. Without these things, how could they stop the most important voters and tourists from leaving? AI boss, how can you still eat at this time? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi sighed helplessly and spoke to Jiang Hai with a hoarse voice. Obviously, he was the most stressed and angry because the beef couldn't be sold. Why can't I eat? People are iron and rice is steel. If I don't eat, I will be hungry. I see a lot of snacks there. Since you don't want to say anything, I will go and buy them. Hearing these people's words, Jiang Hai also knew that they were really not interested in eating now, but Jiang Hai still had to buy them. So, he patted the dust on his butt, and Jiang Hai walked out of the exit against the flow of people. Just when Jiang Hai just left, a group of people also walked in from outside. After looking outside the exhibition hall, a girl walked into the exhibition hall first. "Excuse me, is there a Huaxia person named Jiang Hai here?" Looking at the 3 people in the room, the girl smiled and asked the 3 people. Hearing the girl's words, Luo, Binsi, and Cece were still a little confused, but Bell Lester had already jumped up. Bell didn't seem to love anything except guns. But after all, he was a young man, and he still recognized the girl in front of him. You are." Bell pointed at the girl and said with some surprise, "Hello, I am Jiang Hai's friend. I heard that he had some trouble here, so I came to help." Hearing Bell's excited words, the girl couldn't help but smile sweetly, then said with a serious face, "There's a lot of delicious food here." At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know the situation in the exhibition hall. He had already walked out of the exhibition hall. Just like in China, where there were people, there would be some merchants who would come to set up stalls. It was the same for the American vendors. Of course, compared to the pressure of life, Most of the snacks sold in the United States were sold by Latin Americans, African Americans, Asians, and Middle Easterners. They were selling these snacks to survive. On the other hand, some Caucasians were selling these snacks to earn some extra money. Some of them were selling these snacks just for the experience and to be praised by others. Sometimes Caucasians think differently. Today was the opening day of the beef exhibition, so naturally, there were a lot of delicious food here. When Jiang Hai came, he saw a lot of people setting up stalls here. Now that he came out, there were even more people here. Looking from afar, there were at least 20 or 30 stalls, and there were a lot of people in front of each stall. There was a wide variety of things being sold. The most fragrant was naturally the Arabian barbecue. Those people of Middle Eastern descent were indeed very knowledgeable about barbecue. They also knew how to barbecue ordinary barbecue, how to barbecue it well, how to barbecue it well, and how to barbecue it so that it was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. This was a skill that had been passed down for many years. In addition to the barbecue that attracted Jiang Hai the most, there were also many snacks such as cheese sandwiches, hot dogs, hamburgers, fried chicken, and so on. There was also a snack for Maine, lobster rolls. That was to say, the whole lobster meat was sandwiched in bread with butter and lemon. After roasting in the oven, it tasted pretty good. In addition to this, the most popular one should be the Mexican tortilla. This thing was very dazzling everywhere. In addition to the above few mainstream snacks, there were many less mainstream ones, such as the Spring Festival rolls in Brooklyn, Bolivian snacks, bread, donuts, and even pizza. They sold them on the spot, but it took a long time. Although Jiang Hai liked to eat pizza, it didn't mean that he could wait for a long time, so he quickly decided to buy barbecue and hamburgers. They were a little tired of eating lobster rolls when they were in the fishery. Compared to lobster rolls, the newly made hamburgers were something they liked very much. Not long after, Jiang Hai carried a few big bags in his hand, which were filled with 50 large beef skewers. These people from Middle East were still very particular. The meat on the skewers were large pieces of meat. A beef skewer was about 2 ounces, and these 50 skewers weighed about 10 pounds. The other bags were filled with hamburgers, sandwiches, hot dogs, and so on. Carrying a few big bags, Jiang Hai squeezed into the exhibition hall. But as soon as he walked in, he heard music from a distance. This sound should belong to the category of rock, but it wasn't a very rough rock. Instead, it felt like an orchestra, and the music was a little playful. The next song is a slower one, for everyone. Just as Jiang Hai was wondering who was singing here, a slightly familiar voice came into his ears. As Jiang Hai looked forward, he saw a girl in casual clothes, standing in the middle of the venue with a microphone, slowly twisting to the music while singing a nice ballad. This seems to be my exhibition hall. Looking at the girl, the band behind the girl, and the exhibition hall behind the band, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little confused. With his powerful strength, he forced his way through the crowd and walked into the exhibition hall. When Jiang Hai walked in with things, the girl who was singing also saw Jiang Hai and winked at Jiang Hai. This made Jiang Hai completely confused. What the hell is this, boss? At this time, Luo Binsi and the others also walked over with smiles on their faces and looked at Jiang Hai with joy. What's the situation? Jiang Hai asked with some confusion as he handed the food to the 3 of them. Boss, you are really resourceful. It turns out that you already have a backup plan. You even invited Selena Gomez. God, her specialty album was one of the best-selling specialty albums 2 years ago. She even got first place. How do you know her? Jiang Hai was puzzled. But in fact, his 3 men were even more puzzled, especially Belle Lester, who looked at Jiang Hai with excitement and asked, Soldiers have a paranoid love for female singers. The most powerful country in this regard is Korea. The soldiers of Korea love female groups. It can be said that gongs and drums are loud, firecrackers are fired, and red flags are fluttering. There is a sea of people, especially sexy female celebrities. They are naturally very popular there. In the United States, although it is not as explicit as in Korea, they are also quite interested in the love of beautiful women. Although Selena Gomez is not the most popular in the army, she can still be ranked in the top 10. After all, she is also a very popular female celebrity in the United States recently. She debuted in acting, and singing is not very good. The most important thing is that she is very in line with the aesthetic view of the United States. So her popularity has always been high in the United States. I don't seem to be very familiar with her. Looking at the girl standing outside singing, Jiang Hai said a little awkwardly. Chapter 236. The beef cows in this exhibition hall are from my friend Manor. Please support him. Thank you. As another song ended, Selena Gomez's voice came from outside. Then several people behind her also packed up their instruments and walked into the exhibition hall with her. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai greeted them and looked at her with a little embarrassment. It's really troublesome. Have some drinks. Looking at Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai said with some embarrassment, Hey, it's okay. We are friends. You helped me before. Don't you remember? Taking the drink handed over by Jiang Hai, Selena smiled, then unscrewed the bottle cap and took a sip. She was a little tired after singing a few songs just now. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. The two of them didn't even have a phone call and only met once. Can it be called friends? You must be kidding. But at this time, because Selena's song just now attracted a large number of people, although many people left after Selena left, there were still many people who came in. Although they were curious about the relationship between their boss and Selena Gomez, Robin still remembered their task and immediately greeted them and introduced their cows to these people. However, it was also because of their relationship that these people who entered the exhibition hall had no time to harass Selena Gomez for the time being. Selena Gomez also looked at Jiang Hai and said, By the way, I think your location is good. Why are there so few people? Because I didn't prepare anything. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said with some helplessness, I didn't expect you to be a rich man. Haha, by the way, let me introduce you. This is Zetter, DJ Zetter. He is very famous in the United States. The songs he produced and wrote have reached the top in the 26 countries. He is also the producer of my recent album. Feeling Jiang Hai's embarrassment. After all, Selena Gomez is not very familiar with Jiang Hai. The reason why she chose to come and help was because of Pro Walton's request, and also because she said that she owed Jiang Hai a favor. After all, Jiang Hai helped her, but later she introduced Jiang Hai and Pro Walton to each other. Originally, she wanted to help Jiang Hai open the market, but now it seems that this Jiang Hai is either overconfident or has insufficient social experience. Third, they were a little tired from practicing, so they came here to take a look. Hello. Hearing Selena's words, Jiang Hai also stretched out his hand and shook this handsome man's hand. Hello. Seeing Jiang Hai's hand stretched out, Zetter, who didn't want to pay attention to Jiang Hai, had to shake hands with Jiang Hai. Although their personalities are a little strange when it comes to music, they are strange, not stupid. It's not worthwhile to make things difficult for Jiang Hai. Of course, it's inevitable that he doesn't like Jiang Hai. There are two reasons for this. First, this person is originally a mix of Soviet Russia and German. And whether it's Soviet Russia or German, they're not very friendly to Huaxia and Huaxia people. Second, it's obvious that this guy is interested in Selena Gomez, and Jiang Hai is his imaginary love rival. After all, in his opinion, the United States is a slightly fickle and unloyal society. If someone can take the initiative to sing for you, it's only possible if they have a close relationship. He's been working with Selena for 2 months now, let alone asking her for help. Even if he wants to treat her to a meal, he has never treated her to a meal alone. Every time, he brings the whole orchestra, which makes him very unhappy with Jiang Hai. Therefore, after shaking hands with Jiang Hai, he didn't talk to Jiang Hai anymore. Jiang Hai also felt it, so he just talked to Selena. Selena actually doesn't know much about Jiang Hai. Other than asking about his recent situation, she also talked about the beef cattle show. After a while, they didn't have any common topics. Fortunately, soon, Belle Lester came over excitedly. Boss, we're in the top 16. Belle Lester excitedly showed his phone to Jiang Hai. Although there were more beautiful women outside, although there were games, TV, balloons, banners, and even free drinks outside, but there was still a celebrity and an A-list, quasi-list celebrity. The effect was really good. Not long after, Zhanghai's 15 cows all had their votes. The one with the most votes is the one chosen by Mr. Zhang and Prawalton. The number of votes has reached 736, and it's still increasing rapidly. Unknowingly, it has rushed into the top 16 and is moving towards the top 10. As for the remaining cows, although they weren't as tall, they were still increasing rapidly. Originally, these people didn't come to Zhanghai's place, so they didn't know what kind of cows Zhanghai had. But now that they looked at it, it really was different. In addition to the smell of grass, Zhanghai's cows also have some cow odor, but the odor is very light. If you don't walk very close to it, you can't smell it. This is what Zhanghai discovered recently. Perhaps it was due to the improvement of the pasture. The stench from the cows was basically eliminated. As long as they stayed in a well-ventilated place and didn't let the farts gather in this small space, the smell of the cow sheet would still be there, but it was very light. It's a level that is acceptable even if you don't wear a mask. Moreover, the cows are also very strong. They're almost the same. At a glance, there are no outstanding points. But if you look carefully, every cow is a highlight. Although most of these people who come to the beef cattle exhibition are laymen, they have some knowledge. However, they still had some knowledge in this area. Although their eyes were not as sharp as those of experts, they could still distinguish between good and bad. At least in their opinion, Zhanghai's cow was much better than the Cartwright Company's cow. Manager, that guy's cow has entered the top 16. There's always a limit to the number of visitors. Zhanghai's exhibition hall is popular, so naturally it snatches a lot of visitors who originally belonged to the Cartwright Company. Looking at Zhanghai's exhibition hall with people coming in and out from time to time, Paul K. can't help but go to the young man who was beaten up by Zhanghai that day and whisper to him, "Despicable guy. I didn't expect him to know Selena Gomez. I underestimated him. I thought that a newbie like him wouldn't be able to do anything. Now, it seems like he's really a ferocious dragon." Narrowing his eyes, the manager here muttered softly. Hearing his words, Paul K. and the others beside him stopped talking. Actually, it doesn't matter if he enters the semifinals. Although he has 20,000 cows, he only has 20,000 cows. Don't forget that our cows are the best selected from 2 million cows. The base is different, so naturally the impact will be different. I think he can still be happy for a few more days. After a while, the young man let out a long sigh. He knows that his mentality has been unknowingly affected by Zhanghai. This is very wrong for him. So he calmed himself down and said slowly. Then he stood up and walked to the back of the exhibition hall. He still needs to keep an eye on things. Less than half an hour after he left, Selena Gomez and the others also left. After all, Selena was just here to have fun. She didn't know much about beef cows. Although she was willing to eat special grade A beef, she didn't know how to raise cows. Besides, she didn't know much about Zhanghai. So after she didn't have much to talk with Zhanghai, under the persuasion of the person named Zay, they were ready to go back and continue their training. Of course, before they left, the two of them couldn't help but exchange phone numbers. This time, Zhanghai was really grateful to her. He told her that if she had time, she must go to his manor in Boston to have fun. He really had enough special grade A beef. Perhaps before she saw Zhanghai's cows, she would have thought that Zhanghai was just bullshitting. But now, it seemed that Zhanghai really had such an ability, so she happily agreed. After Selena left, the number of visitors in Zhanghai's exhibition hall decreased by more than half in an instant. But it didn't matter. With the popularity, just now, Zhanghai's cows' votes were increasing rapidly. Zhanghai was quite confident in his cows. His only worry was that they couldn't pass the first day. As long as they passed the first day and entered the second day, which had nothing to do with popularity, then Zhanghai's confidence, which could be said to be the confidence of his cows, would all rise. As time went by, Zhanghai and the others gradually calmed down. It seemed that God was really good to them. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the selection time for the day officially ended. After the last group of tourists left, Zhanghai and the others gradually calmed down. On the official website of the New York Beef Show, the beef cows that would enter the semifinals tomorrow were ranked. Ranked first, of course, was the 5A beef cow of the Suzuki Group, which had a total of 17,556 votes. Ranked second was Jianghai's old rival, a Belgian blue cow of the Carlight Company. But all the experts knew that the reason why this Belgian blue cow was ranked second, with a total of 9,788 votes, was mainly because its muscles were really developed. Its muscles were like those of a bodybuilder, which was really eye-catching. But the so-called marble pattern, the white inside, was the fat, so the blue cow's muscles were too dense. Although it was popular, it probably wouldn't have a good effect. The third was an Angus cow of the Truman Company, and the fourth was an Angus cow of the Carlight Company. The fifth was a Charolais cow of the Boveda Company, and the sixth was a 5A Wagyu cow of the Suzuki Company, but it wasn't very strong. It seemed that it was bought for the biggest Wagyu cow. Two of Jianghai's cows were lucky to be selected, one ranked 11th, and the other ranked 15th, entering the semifinals tomorrow. Chapter 237. Wilpon Manor, number A456-6378, Rule Maya Company, number 8278-8940. At night, when the tourists left during the day and went to live in nearby hotels, or went back to their homes in New York to eat, rest, or sleep, some people were busy in the central activity room of the New York Beef Cattle Exhibition Hall. These people were the staff here. After a busy day, they were very tired, but they couldn't rest now because they had to choose the most popular 16 cows from so many cows. Of course, all of this was managed by a computer, but it also needed people to register. As for the number of the cows, a lot of things could be seen from it. It didn't mean that there were more than 500,000 cows for the selection. Today's exhibition hall only had more than 100 cows. Even if there were an average of 10 cows in each exhibition hall, there were only a little more than 1,000 cows. The numbers here were also learned. A represented a bull, B represented a cow, and C represented a dairy cow. The first two represented which state in the U.S. the cow came from. The second represented which city it came from, and the last three represented the number of the cow. This was the same as the ID number, which was registered by the Beef Cattle Association. If there was an exception, it would be checked, so these numbers couldn't be wrong. Soaring Dragon Manor, serial number A479248. In the beginning, when they were reading, the other cows all came from some company. When they came here, it became a manor, which made the staff here a little surprised. Soaring Dragon Manor? Are you sure you didn't read it wrong? Hearing this person's words, the person next to him couldn't help but be surprised. In fact, this beef cattle exhibition had always been a stage for big companies to show their strength. This was because only those big companies could spend so much money to buy exhibition booths and prepare things for the exhibition booths. Even a booth in a bad location would cost $100,000 or $200,000, plus a TV, beautiful women, and so on. To participate in this exhibition, it would cost at least $25,000 or $60,000. Most ranchers in the U.S. might not be able to earn $25,000 or $60,000 in a few years, let alone 1 year. It should be known that the median household income in the U.S. wasn't the average, but the median. It was about $4,000 a month. After deducting state and national taxes, there would be about $3,300 to $3,400 left. $25,000 or $60,000 was definitely not a small income in the U.S. In the past, some private ranches would also participate in the exhibition hall, so when Jianghai signed up, they didn't care. However, Jianghai could actually make it to the top 16, which surprised them a little. For a while, many people looked over. And, of course, I didn't mispronounce it. It is indeed the Soaring Dragon Manor. Wait a minute, not only did he get one, he got two. This is really strange. Is this the result of a super rich second generation's money? Seeing that everyone was staring at him, this person was a little nervous. After hesitating for a moment, he also looked carefully. After making sure that he was not mistaken, he said in a serious tone. But as he continued to scan the list, he found that Jiang Hai's manor had not only one cow, but two cows. What the F asterisk CK? What the F asterisk CK is going on? As soon as they heard this person's words, a lot of people gathered around the screen and looked at the person's data. Sure enough, Jiang Hai's two cows were ranked 10th and 15th. When they saw these two cows, they couldn't help but look at each other. This kind of thing was really rare. Hey, you guys are just surprised because you haven't seen it before. The owner of that manor is the new Asian this year. Didn't he invite Selena Gomez today? It's not surprising that he is so popular. Seeing the surprised eyes of his colleagues, a person who was processing data in the distance said with a smile. Hearing his words, everyone reacted. They remembered Jiang Hai's face, which didn't look special. But because Jiang Hai was the only Asian senior among the people who came to participate today, they all had some understanding of Jiang Hai. Originally, when they saw that Jiang Hai wasn't prepared yesterday, they secretly laughed at Jiang Hai. They didn't expect that today, Jiang Hai could invite the popular idol, Selena Gomez. At that time, they really broke glasses. In fact, when Jiang Hai knew that Selena Gomez was coming, his glasses were also broken. With this reason, there weren't too many shortlisted cows. After the recording was completed, the organizers also sent the shortlisted cows to the phones of the major companies and the shortlisted manor owners. Of course, the only shortlisted manor owner was Jiang Hai alone. After receiving this news, Jiang Hai couldn't help but clench his fists. This was good news for him. Of course, he also knew that this result was because of Selena Gomez's help. He immediately sent a text message to Selena Gomez to thank her for her help today. At this time, Selena Gomez was sitting in a banquet hall, eating dinner with a little uneasiness. After receiving Jiang Hai's text message, she couldn't help but glance at it, then replied with an okay gesture. Who is it? Seeing that Gomez actually replied to a text message while eating, a woman sitting opposite her said lightly. If Jiang Hai was here at this time, he would definitely recognized that the woman sitting opposite Selena Gomez was none other than Prawalton, but at this time, she had changed out of her strong women's suit. Instead, she changed into a slightly loose dress, like a dress, but also like pajamas. As for Selena, she was not as wild as she was during the daytime performance. Instead, she was like a kitten sitting opposite him. It's Jiang Hai, the person you asked me to help today. Sister Prawalton, are you interested in him? Hearing Prawalton's words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but chuckle. After putting down the phone, she asked her, Me? Oh, you're thinking too much. I think you should know my situation very well. Rather than saying that I have feelings for that man, it's better to say that I have feelings for his cattle. This guy is really good at raising cattle. It seems that I underestimated him a little. The cattle he raises should be very easy to slaughter into a special grade of beef. And this kind of beef is also the main product that our Sam's Club wants to expand. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Prawalton put down the knife and fork in her hand and said with a serious face. Looking at Prawalton's burning eyes, Selena Gomez couldn't help but lower her head in embarrassment. Seeing her appearance, Prawalton was also interested. She slowly stood up, dragged her black dress, and walked to Selena Gomez's side. Her right index finger gently lifted Selena Gomez's chin. She looked at Selena Gomez with a serious face and said slowly, And, even if I'm interested in you, baby. As Prawalton's voice fell, her red lips had already heavily kissed Selena Gomez's mouth. Facing such a strong kiss, Selena Gomez didn't know whether it was because she was in a daze or because she was mentally prepared. When she didn't resist, Prawalton's hands, which were originally around her shoulders, slowly moved forward. But just as she was about to reach the top, Selena Gomez's hand pressed on hers. Sister Prawalton, this won't do. Selena Gomez, who recovered a trace of consciousness, said hesitantly, You're not ready yet? You've been preparing for a long time, or you haven't forgotten that bastard boy. Looking at Selena Gomez in front of her, Prawalton asked with a serious face. I don't think about him anymore. I've completely broken up with him. It's over. There's no possibility of continuing, but my heart still can't let me and Sister Prawalton do that kind of thing with you. Hearing Prawalton's words, Selena Gomez immediately denied her words. As for her previous words, she hesitated a little. It doesn't matter. I believe you will understand one day. What's so good about a man? What a man can do, I can do, and even better than a man. You already know that, don't you? Seeing Selena's resistance, Prawalton shrugged. Although she likes her, she won't force her. Hearing Prawalton's explicit words, Selena Gomez's face couldn't help but blush, but she didn't speak anymore. She still used a fork in her hand to poke the steak in front of her. As for the waiter in the house, obviously he's been specially trained. He pretended not to see anything and looked straight ahead. At this time, Jiang Hai also looked straight ahead, but he wasn't looking at the air, but at his cows. After they finished packing tonight, it was already late. At the moment, Jiang Hai decided to take the three of them to have a casual meal nearby, and then he will watch here at night in case someone comes to make trouble. In fact, Jiang Hai has another task here in addition to watching, that is to strengthen these cows again. Looking at the two cows in front of him, Jiang Hai whispered in a low voice, I know you are the best. Now that you are in the semifinals, I feel that you will have no problem at all entering the finals. Come on, I will give you more food tonight, come on. After muttering, he channeled the spirit energy from one of his scales into his hand. He didn't just inject it into the two cows that made it into the top 16, but injected it into all 15 cows. In an instant, the eyes of these cows, which already had some intelligence, seemed to have become more intelligent. But after looking at Jiang Hai, they returned to their original appearance. After all, the spirit energy contained in the scale was equivalent to a drop of blood in the past, and now that it was distributed to 15 cows, although there was some evolution, it wasn't too obvious. Chapter 238. Welcome to the New York Beef Show again. Today is the second day of the New York Beef Show, and also the semifinals for the selection of the King of Bulls. Today, our 16 bulls will be graded in order, and the top 8 with the highest scores will enter the finals. Now, please give a cheer. Yesterday, we ranked 16th in popularity, the bull from the Roger Paltrow Company in Kansas, Baby Superpower. As the host's voice fell, a strong bull walked onto the stage. After the bull walked onto the stage, the man kept talking and introducing the situation of the bull. At this time, Jiang Hai and the others were sitting together backstage. Except for them, the other people and bulls were quite happy. Thinking about it, it was understandable. The people here were all representing their own companies. Only Jiang Hai represented himself. In addition, he didn't have a good relationship with the local tyrant, the Cartwright Company, so no one would risk offending the Cartwright Company to make friends with Jiang Hai. Of course, if they knew that Jiang Hai had 20,000 beef cattle with special grade A beef, they would probably forget about the Cartwright Company in an instant. This was the advantage and disadvantage of capitalism. This was a game, a crocodile's game, and everything depended on money. Jiang Hai didn't care about the attitude of these people, and he just studied the mobile phone with his subordinates. Boss, even if we don't get the king of cattle this time, our manor will be famous. There are a total of 16 cattle, and our manor has 2 of them in the finals. This is a rare event. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins couldn't close his mouth since yesterday, when he found out that his manor had 2 of them in the finals. For him, this was something he didn't even dare to think about before. It was not an exaggeration to say that the United States was the world's largest beef cattle producer. The amount of beef cattle here was several times more than the second place, Huaxia, and their population was only a quarter of Huaxia's. It was precisely because of this ratio of population and the amount of beef that they had. Therefore, in the United States, ordinary beef was indeed much cheaper than domestic beef, even if it was converted to RMB. In addition, the people in the United States loved beef crazily. Therefore, the people who made a living in the United States, other than the cowboys, the manor owners, and the supermarket owners, the middlemen, which are the livestock companies, also made a lot of money. In modern society, no matter what it was, it had to be advertised. And the best advertisement was a competition. He wanted to let others know that his cow was better than others, and it had to be done in a fair, just, and open environment. It was precisely because of such an environment and market that some businessmen involved in politics began to hold various beef competitions. Of course, various state governments and municipal governments were also very active in participating. As the number of competitions increased, the various regions would also filter out some of the weaker competitions and not allow them to hold them anymore. However, some competitions that had an official background and a good reputation would continue. The New York Beef Show was such a competition. Needless to say, New York was the financial center of the United States and even the world. But a long time ago, the people here also raised cattle. But later on, they stopped raising cattle. Although there were almost no large-scale cattle farms in New York, every move here was related to the fate of the cattle industry in the United States. This was because the price of beef and forage was set here. Although the livestock industry in the eastern United States was not as developed as the central United States and the northwestern United States, the beef show here was not the best in the country, but it was still one of the top 5 in the country. In such a beef show, being able to rank in the top 16 was a good advertisement. In the past, only the large livestock companies could get a share of the cake. Now, Shanghai took away 2 pieces of cake. It would be strange if the large livestock companies would care about Shanghai. Moreover, they could do him a favor. It will be our turn soon. Belle and I will go out first. Then, Cece and Robbins will go out when it is the 10th contestant. Listening to the host's introduction of the 16th ranked bull, Super Baby, Shanghai's first bull was about to go on stage. Who told him to be the 15th bull? Okay. Hearing Shanghai's words, the 3 people nodded. They had no objections. Shanghai did a good job. At the very least, there was a cowboy in each group, and there was someone who could control the situation. Seeing that no one had any objections, Shanghai and Belle stood up and walked to the faraway cowshed. This was because many bulls, especially bulls, were very aggressive. It was still spring now, and if a bull went berserk, ordinary people would not be able to hold it back. Therefore, the organizers almost never let bulls from different companies meet under any circumstances, just like now. These bulls stayed in their respective cars and were surrounded by cloth to prevent other bulls from seeing each other. But just as Shanghai and Belle were about to walk to his F-750 trailer, a group of people stood up. However, a group of people also stood up. The leader of the group was Paul K. I really didn't expect you to enter the semifinals so easily. However, your good luck ends here. Facing Shanghai, Paul K said with a ruthless face. At first, he was a little afraid of Shanghai, because when Shanghai bet with him, he was full of confidence. He really thought that Shanghai had some kind of bull king. But after yesterday's discussion, he found that Shanghai's bulls were very ordinary, because in other people's eyes, Shanghai's bulls were almost the same. Except for the different patterns on their bodies, there was almost no difference. At least in the eyes of a layman like him, he could not see what was so good about Shanghai's bulls. No matter what, there needed to be a comparison. But Shanghai's bulls did not have a comparison. When a group of 2-meter-tall people stood together, you wouldn't notice how tall they were. It was like sitting in front of TV and watching an NBA game. You wouldn't pay too much attention to this problem. However, when a 2-meter-tall person suddenly stood beside a group of 8-meter-tall people, it was very obvious. Therefore, in the eyes of people like Paul K., who couldn't tell the density of the meat and the fat content of the beef at a glance, it was impossible for Shanghai to have 15 bull kings. He must have 15 ordinary bulls. And Shanghai did not have a bull king. With such strength, in his opinion, Shanghai was bound to lose. Shanghai's popularity yesterday proved it. If he did not use his personal connections in the end to invite Selena Gomez, he might not even have a spot. But even so, in the face of the bull kings chosen by their companies, Shanghai still had no chance. Prepare a million. In the face of this guy's clamor, Shanghai looked at him with some pity. If he could live in a dream forever, it would be a very good thing for him. But Shanghai was not a good person. He was very willing to wake him up with water when he was sleeping soundly. Hearing Shanghai's tough reply, Paul K. could not help but stare at Jiang Hai angrily. Well, I want to see how you use your ordinary bulls to win against our company's bulls. Yesterday, Cartwright Company ranked second in the popularity ranking. In their opinion, other than Suzuki's bull, their bulls were worthy of being called the Bull King. And the people in the United States were more or less discriminating and xenophobic. As long as their company's bulls were not really a few levels lower than that bull, then this year's champion would still be theirs. As for Jiang Hai, he was no longer in their sight. So confident. Do you want to raise the stakes? Seeing Paul K's appearance, Jiang Hai chuckled and said to him, "Oomph." When he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to use money to pressure people again, although he wanted to agree, his rationality told him that he could not. Because even if he was really sure of winning, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if today's judges' brains were damaged, or they had already been bought by Jiang Hai? So after Jiang Hai's voice fell, he did not agree. "We'll accept," but just as he was about to leave, suddenly a voice that Jiang Hai was familiar with came from behind him. Jiang Hai looked up and found that the person who came was none other than the manager of Cartwright Company. Manager? Seeing that his manager actually stood up for him, Paul K. was very surprised. "What's going on?" The day before yesterday, when Jiang Hai said that he wanted to raise the stakes, his manager didn't dare to agree. Why did he dare to do it today? "We accepted your bet, but I won't bet on who can win the Bull King. I only bet that you can't win." Walking to Paul K's side, the manager looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and said, "Yesterday's incident was not small. Even Paul K. secretly went to look at Jiang Hai's beef bulls. How could he not collect information about his opponent? Unlike Paul K., who could judge Jiang Hai's bulls with his own eyes that they were all ordinary bulls. But he could still use other methods to prove that Jiang Hai's bulls were all ordinary bulls. In the end, he discovered that Jiang Hai's bulls really weren't good bulls. They were ordinary Angus bulls. Although there was no detailed medical report, 6 months ago, when Jiang Hai bought the bulls, Paul K. still managed to get the medical report of the bulls through his connections. Could an ordinary bull be turned into a Bull King after only half a year of breeding? Regardless of whether other people believed it or not, Paul K. did not believe it. In addition, he had also spoken to his father last night. He could afford $10 million. Most importantly, he could use this opportunity to not only trample on Jiang Hai and make $10 million, but he could also advertise himself, a free advertisement. But even though he was certain that Jiang Hai couldn't win the Bull King, he still played a word game. He wasn't betting on whether he or Jiang Hai could win the Bull King, because Suzuki and Truman had the same chance. So he was betting that Jiang Hai's bulls couldn't win the Bull King. In other words, not only did Jiang Hai have to defeat his bulls, but he also had to defeat all the bulls here. Hearing this, Jiang Hai chuckled and said directly to the person opposite him, "Okay, let's make a bet." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cartwright's lawyer immediately handed the printed bet contract to the two of them. Basically, the bet didn't change, but it changed from Jiang Hai and Paul K. to Jiang Hai and Cartwright's company. And the bet turned into whether or not Jiang Hai's cow can win the New York Beef Cattle Show's championship. The bet was $10 million in cash. Whoever lost the bet had to transfer the money to the other party's bank account within an hour after the winner was announced. Otherwise, it would be considered a breach of contract. The breach of contract was $100 million, and the winner could file a lawsuit at any time. This kind of bet was impossible in China because gambling of any kind was not allowed in China. But it was possible here. When Jiang Hai saw the other party take out the contract, he knew that the other party came prepared. He took a look at it and sent a photo to Moses Adams. When Moses Adams received the photo, he knew that the Cartwright Company had suffered a big loss this time. Don't forget that as Jiang Hai's lawyer, Moses Adams went to Jiang Hai's place and ate a lot of beef. Although the chef in Jiang Hai's manor was not skilled, when the beef was processed in a Western restaurant, the taste was unforgettable. He knew that Cartwright's company would definitely lose. So he immediately looked at the contract. After confirming that there were no traps, he called Jiang Hai. After getting the confirmation, Jiang Hai signed his name on it without saying anything. The manager on the other side also signed his name, Rosalind Cartwright, and added their company's seal. When the contract came into effect, the host at the front desk announced the score of the first cow. The staff began to urge Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai calmly put the contract in his pocket and nodded to Belle Lester. Seeing Jiang Hai's movement, Belle Lester opened the door of the trailer immediately. With the sound of hydraulic pressure lifting the door, a majestic bull walked out of the trailer. When the bull swept its gaze over everyone like a king, everyone was stunned. Didn't he say that he only had 15 ordinary cows? What is this? An American who had been smoking in the distance didn't even notice that his cigarette had burned out. His eyes were fixed on the giant beast behind Jiang Hai, his face full of shock. As for Rosalind Cartwright, who was closest to the bull, his pupils had unconsciously dilated. Yesterday, they had only seen the cows from afar. In order to prevent accidents, the organizer had set up a 3-meter iron fence between the cows and the cows to separate them. That was why he hadn't seen the cows from such a close distance. At the same time, he had never thought that he could feel the aura of a ferocious beast from a cow. Under the gaze of the cow, which seemed to be inspecting its territory, Jiang Hai reached out and grabbed one of the cow's horns. The cow wanted to resist at first. This was the difference between a cow and Jiang Hai's pet. Pets were smarter, and this cow, at most, had the IQ of a 2- or 3-year-old child. It did not know what obedience was. This was why Jiang Hai didn't feel bad when he killed the cows. Facing twice the strength of a human, the cow had no choice but to let Jiang Hai press its head down. Now, we're going to participate in the competition. Remember to prepare 10 million in cash. Looking at Rosalind Cartwright in front of him, Jiang Hai's lips curled into an evil smile. At least in his eyes, it was an evil smile. Chapter 239. Next, we will welcome the bull that ranked 15th yesterday. This bull is from the same place as the 10th bull that will appear next. They are from our neighboring province. Next, let's welcome Robin's number 1 from the Soaring Dragon Manor in Winthrop Town, Massachusetts. The host on stage shouted after the staff member explained the situation. As his voice fell, they saw 2 young men slowly walking out from the backstage with a cow. When the cow appeared, many of the audience couldn't help but gasp in shock. Many of them had seen Jiang Hai's bull yesterday. After all, Selena Gomez's performance had been very impressive. Originally, they had only seen Jiang Hai's bull because Selena had voted for Jiang Hai. In the eyes of most people, there was nothing special about Jiang Hai's 15 bulls that were almost the same. Just as Paul K. had thought, it was easy to raise 1 bull king, but it was almost impossible to raise 2 bulls king. If all 15 bulls were basically the same, then it proved that Jiang Hai's bulls were ordinary bulls. However, when Jiang Hai's bull was pulled onto the stage today, these people were a little confused. Whether it was good or not depended mainly on the comparison. On Jiang Hai's side, Robin's number 1, this was also Robin's Garcia's idea. When the staff called yesterday to say that they wanted to name the bulls, the first names that came to Jiang Hai's mind were Big Bull and Air Bull, which were translated into English as Wanbulu and Tubulu. It was really a little silly. Later, he thought of calling them Bronze Bull and Iron Bull. However, this name was also rejected directly. In the end, Robin said that these bulls were raised by him and were like his children. He wouldn't use the surname Garcia because it was blasphemous to his ancestors, but he would use the name Robins. Hence, he called them Robin's number 1 and Robin's number 2. Well, the topic was a little off topic. Let's get back to it. The first bull before Jiang Hai went on stage, which was the bull that ranked 16th yesterday, was a Hayford bull. Actually, this cow was not bad. It weighed about 1150 kilograms and was one of the oldest breeds of cattle in the world. It had a broad body, a well-developed chest, a short head, a wide forehead, and a short and thick neck. It was covered in reddish-brown fur and looked very good. It was just that the whiteness of its face made it look like a skull, so its ranking was a little low. But to be honest, this was definitely a good cow. If this cow was sold as a whole, it would probably be sold for between $12,000 and $15,000 because it was going to be sold as a breeding cow. The judges gave this cow a high score of 8.74. With such a score, it was possible for it to directly enter the top 8. However, when Jiang Hai's bull came up, these people instantly felt that the previous bull's score was too high. This is an Angus bull. It's now 23 months old. It's a good age for gambling and breeding. It's 145.8 centimeters tall, and weighs 805 kilograms. Although it's not as heavy as Super Baby, it's still a rare big guy among Angus bulls. And it looks like it's much more muscular than Super Baby. It wasn't the host's first time hosting such a competition, so he had some understanding of bulls. As he read about this bull, he also observed it. He had to admit that in terms of body size, Jiang Hai's bull was a little thinner than the Hayford bull. However, the streamlined muscles on Jiang Hai's bull were really beautiful and terrifying. Most importantly, the aura on Jiang Hai's bull was completely different from that of ordinary bulls. If other bulls stood here, they would just be bulls. If there was a wild beast beside them, they would be food. No matter how strong and big this bull was, Jiang Hai's bull had its own wild nature. Although it stood there without moving, when its smart eyes swept around, many people would feel their buttholes tighten as if they were being stared at by a wild beast. This was the strength of Jiang Hai's bull. I haven't seen this bull for a night, but it seems to have become stronger. In the crowd, Perwalton was also sitting there, but the people sitting beside her were all her subordinates. Looking at the bull on the stage, her eyes couldn't help but flash. She felt that she had bet on the right thing. Jiang Hai's bull was really not an ordinary bull. Dad, this bull is very good. On the other side, Zhang Dihai's family of 4 was sitting together. His eldest son also pushed up his glasses and whispered to his father. This man also knew about Jiang Hai's existence, but he didn't think that this man would have any relationship with him. He was nothing more than his father's friend. But now it seems that this guy will be a great help to his family's business. Of course I know, my little friend. Is he such a simple person? After listening to his son's words, looking at Jiang Hai and the bull on the stage, Zhang Dihai's eyes narrowed, because he remembered that this guy has 20,000 bulls like this. This bull is so beautiful. It's so wild. I feel that if it wasn't for the 2 people on the stage, it might have rushed over. Those eyes are so beautiful. If this bull is not the king of bulls, then what is it? I really doubt that such a beautiful bull was only ranked 15th yesterday. There are many people who had the same thoughts as Zhang Dihai and Perwalton. However, most of these people chose to shut up because behind them, there were some Western restaurants and some supermarkets. Now they're already considering whether to discuss the quota with Jiang Hai. And now, the people who are talking are basically tourists. In the eyes of tourists, Jiang Hai's bull is really good. Next, the basic introduction has been done. Please give the judges a score. The host touched Jiang Hai's robin's number 1 lovingly and said with some reluctance, "He has been hosting here for so long, and many things have happened that he doesn't want to recall, such as the bull suddenly going crazy, or the bull not cooperating and kept moving, or the bull urinating and defecating on the stage, and so on. But the most unbearable thing for him is the stench on the bull. He is not an ordinary tourist or judge. The judges can shut up, but he can't. If he keeps opening his mouth to speak, the stench will enter his body and even cause problems with his body. But Jiang Hai's bull solved this problem to the greatest extent. Jiang Hai's bull also has some smell, but it is more of the fragrance of grass, not the stench of the bull itself. This kind of smell can't be brushed. This is the feeling of nature." When he thought that after Jiang Hai's bull went down, the bull behind Jiang Hai's bull was still smelly, he was a little reluctant to let Jiang Hai's bull go down. But no matter what, he was still a responsible host, so he still followed the rhythm with a serious face. Before giving the score, I have a question to ask this young man. Young man, where are you from? Just as the host was about to ask the judges to give the score at this time, in the audience, an old man slowly stood up and asked Jiang Hai, "I am from Huaxia. I came to the United States to invest in a ranch. Now I am in Winthrop." Looking at the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai did not refuse to answer, but he stood up and said to him, "These bulls, are you the one who raised them?" Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the old man pushed his glasses and asked with some excitement, although I can't say that I raised them, they're indeed produced in my manor. The main credit goes to my cowboys." Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He would not tell his secret to others, not even his closest relatives. Therefore, this was not the time to claim credit. If he pushed the credit to the cowboys, he would get a lot of benefits in one fell swoop. Sure enough, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bell, who was standing next to Jiang Hai, couldn't help but have a look of excitement on his face. "Then I wonder, are there many of these bulls in your manor?" Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't claim credit, the old man was a little surprised. After all, the thoughts of the people in the United States are different from the thoughts of the people in China. In his opinion, with such an opportunity to show his face, it was difficult for someone like Jiang Hai, who was less than 30 years old, to control himself. He estimated that when the time came, he would shout that all the credit was his, but Jiang Hai did not let him do as he wished. "It's okay." Hearing that the old man wanted to inquire about the secrets of his manor, Jiang Hai didn't say much. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Babbitt Hill, an animal protection scholar. I see that your bulls not only have the aura of intelligence, but also the aura of the wild. This kind of aura should be called aura in Huaxia. Many of the animals we protect now are artificially bred. After releasing them into the wild, they lack the aura of intelligence, which makes it difficult for them to survive in the wild. I don't know if we can go to your manor for research after this conference." Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man didn't beat around the bush and spoke directly to him. Hearing his words, the people next to him couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. This was almost like a pie falling from the sky. This old man, Babbitt Hill, was very famous in the United States. He even sat in the front row at the meetings of the World Environmental Protection Organization. Any place that he took a fancy to was likely to become a conservation area. Not to mention other things, the price of the land there would instantly increase by more than 10 times. If he was not willing to sell, he could casually get some formulas and plans from his hands. It was enough to make the manor both famous and rich. Hearing the old man's words, the people in the backstage clenched their hands at this time. They looked at Jiang Hai with a nervous, envious, and jealous face. However, it seemed that Jiang Hai was not familiar with this old man, and even if he was familiar with him, he would not let him study it. "Let's talk about this later. Old man, hurry up and give the score. There are other contestants behind. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.